Okay, looks like we're on YouTube.
Okay. Just FYI, Glenn said he's trying to connect.
Okay. I see him coming in now.
Cool.
But we are in practice session.
Yeah, I'm not seeing any attendees yet.
Yeah, I think we have to leave practice session to get our attendees. Let's hope that's correct.
Yep. I'll take us out.
Okay. Yeah, we're getting attendees now.
Okay. All right, welcome to the January 27th, 2022 BAR Small Virtual Meeting. My name is Lindsay Van Slambrook. The other board members present today are Bill Huey, Julia Martin, Fillmore Wilson, and Glenn Gardner will be joining us. City staff present today are Frankie Pinto, Senior Preservation Planner, Allison Hill DeLong, Preservation Planner, and Tori Parrish, City Architect. The order of today's meeting will be as follows. Each application will get an introduction and overview of the project by city staff to the board and for the benefit of the public. This will be followed by an applicant presentation, which has a 10-minute time limit. Please clearly state your name first and last for the record if you are speaking, and persons affiliated with the project, such as owners, developers, designers, and consultants, should speak during this period rather than during public comment. By custom, the board asks questions on the heels of the applicant's presentation. This will be followed by a period of public comment. If you are speaking as a member of the public, please state your name clearly for the record. Public comment will be followed by city staff comments and recommendations. And then this will be followed by a applicant response period that will be limited to 5 minutes. This is not a time to reopen your presentation. It is a time to clarify or respond to anything raised during public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations. After the applicant's response period, public comment and the applicant presentation will be closed, and we will enter board discussion and a vote. The following items have been withdrawn this evening. Agenda item number 7, 460 King Street. And finally, please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, and livability concerns are not within the purview of this board and cannot be voiced here. Now I'll turn it over to Frankie for some virtual meeting protocol.
We have actually switched it up this week, and I am going to be running the show.
All right, go ahead, Allison.
All right. All right, staff will control the PowerPoint presentation. That includes everything submitted by the applicant by the deadline in accordance with the submittal requirements. Applicants simply need to ask staff to advance to the next slide during your presentation. Applicants, staff, and board members are required to give their name whenever speaking. Video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees, not board members or staff, will only be given the capabilities to speak when they are called on during the public comment period. Chat and the Q&A functions have been disabled for everyone. Public comment, the applicants, all team members, and the public have been required to register, indicate the project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as an in-person meeting, all applicants heard today are part of the public meeting format. If you have registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called in order by project. Staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. Unregistered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. The board members will be polled by the chairperson for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member, when voting, should respond yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chair shall reread the motion verbatim for accuracy. If a board member needs to recuse, he or she will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into executive session, they will call into a separate conference line, and all video and audio on Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they are ready to return to the regular meeting. Results and staff comments will be posted on the city website at www.charleston-sc.gov/BAR. These proceedings are being recorded and broadcasted to the City of Charleston's YouTube channel.
Thank you, Allison. Agenda item number 1, 29 Lagree Street. Allison, if you'll give us an introduction and overview, please.
Sure. We've got 29 Lagree Street is a request for final approval for a new handrail at front steps. This is coming to the board. It's a category 2 in Charlestown neighborhood, and the main structure is constructed circa 1835 in the Old and Historic District. Here's some aerial context for you. Existing site photos. Context across the street. And some historic images, courtesy of Historic Charleston Foundation. And the 1973 architectural inventory card. And then the applicant's presentation. So just let me know when you want me to advance through the slides for you.
Mr. Keys, you're on mute.
I'm Glenn Keys. I'm the architect for the project. The house at 29 Lagree sits on the street, as most of them do on that street. It has stairs that land on the sidewalk that are made of white marble. They're very handsome steps. However, they can be pretty treacherous during when they are wet. And the owners are requesting the design of a new handrail. We're proposing a bronze handrail with an iron baluster and bronze finial. We have worked with the Preservation Society of Charleston. They hold the easement on this property and they're supportive of our project. And we are requesting final approval. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Keys. Are there any questions from my fellow board members?
Oh, this is Bill. I have one quick question. Glenn, I see in the photograph tread detail of the existing bottom tread, the volute. Is that where you're going to drill and engage this this new support post on each side?
Yes, we will. That is a pretty traditional treatment, and taking it out further would put it further into the public right away. So I think this is probably the best location for that newel.
Kind of right there where it sets up. Is that what we're saying?
Correct. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
And Glenn, material-wise, it's just bronze and iron, right? No brass.
That's correct.
Any other board questions at this time? Okay, we'll move on to public comment. Do we have anyone speaking from the public?
I think Frankie's checking on that for us.
Sorry, I couldn't find Aaron in the list. We have Aaron Minnigan speaking for Preservation Society.
Thank you. I'm Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society is the easement holder for 29 Lagree Street. We have reviewed the proposal for a new handrail at the front steps, which presents a minimal and compatible alteration, and have approved the request. We encourage the board to grant final approval this evening. Thank you.
Frankie, is that all for public comment?
That is everyone we have signed up to speak.
Okay, Allison, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Sure. First, we have some staff observations. This application is being brought to the board as it is a request for an alteration to a Category 2 structure. Other buildings along the streetscape feature iron handrails extending from the facade entrance. And staff appreciates the volute detail at the terminus of the handrail as it relates to the detailing on the adjacent stairs. Staff comments, the proposed design is simple and does not add additional anchoring to the existing structure. Being a handrail without balusters, it appears more modern or commercial. However, staff generally agrees with the proposal. And number two, the plan indicates an iron newel and bronze finials. The applicant should clarify if the volute detail will be brass as depicted or iron or bronze, which the applicant already clarified. Staff recommendation, final approval with staff comments noted.
Thank you, Allison. Mr. Keys, did you want to respond to or clarify anything raised during public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
No, thank you. I think it's all clear to me. Thank you.
Okay. I'll open it up now for board discussion and a vote.
Fillmore here. Quick question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm having technical difficulties. My remote camera and microphone died just as I logged into the meeting, and my laptop sits on the counter across the room. And so I've switched over to that camera and microphone. I just wanted to make sure that you could hear me. Thank you.
I can just go ahead and make a motion for final approval with staff comments noted.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for final approval with staff comments noted. Do I have a second?
Glenn Gardner, second.
Thank you, Glenn. I'll put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes as a majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Keys.
Thank you.
Okay, agenda item number 2, 171 East Bay Street. Allison, please give us an introduction.
171 East Bay Street has a request for an appeal of staff denial for extraneous information on signage. Building is not rated. It's in the French Quarter in the Old and Historic District. There's a context for the location, existing site photos, some context of the street, and some Sanborn maps showing the building in 1884 and in 1902. And I will turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Hi, good afternoon. Kyle Goggins with the Ruby Slipper Restaurant Group and Ruby Sunshine. Presenting today as the applicant. Just wanted to share a moment about Ruby Slipper and Ruby Sunshine. So we are a breakfast-based restaurant, cafe, based out of New Orleans. This location, which opened December 8th, is our first location in Charleston. And we were approved for the Ruby Slipper red sign that you see on the screen. We're asking for approval of the breakfast, lunch, cocktails tagline that accompanies that sign. We're really excited to be in Charleston. This is our first location in the state of South Carolina. It's location number 20 for us. So we're a mom and pop that was founded in 2008 and is continuing to grow. We have a second site that we're hoping to open in the late summer, July, in the Charleston Victory area on on Savannah Highway, but this is our first location. And so we feel that having the tagline as part of the signage really will help patrons and guests understand who we are and what we're there to do, and really what we bring to Charleston. I believe that the signage was originally denied as extraneous information, but as you can see, our normal base sign is just a descriptor of our name, but without any other descriptors. Doesn't really help people to understand what we do. I'll say just one quick point is, you know, this location, we expect to be a really strong location. We're really excited to be in the downtown walkable area. We really like the historic district. It reminds us a lot of New Orleans, so we appreciate that. And we've had great reception, but we have seen a slower introduction into the neighborhood, into this market, not having another location already there. And so we think that this will help us to introduce ourselves and help patients understand what we do.
Thank you, Mr. Goggins. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
I guess, let me ask a quick one. So Mr. Goggins, like, originally you just intended to do the sign with the logo and then subsequently decided you would like to add the kind of descriptive panel as well. Is that right?
Well, originally we wanted both as shown. What was approved was just the red sign, and so we filed for a variance request for the tagline. But we did design this and purchase it with the intention of having both together.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move into public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We do not have anyone signed up to speak.
Okay, then Allison, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Sure. So this application is coming to the board as an appeal of BAR staff conditional approval for the primary sign only, which was given due to the BAR policy statement for signs that discourages against extraneous information. Staff feels after further consideration that the name Ruby Sunshine and logo on the sign do not fully convey the type of business as a restaurant, and therefore the proposed razor sign would not be extraneous. It's simplistic in design, size, design, and verbiage. The overall dimension of the approved sign and the proposed razor sign together are within the ordinance allowance of 9 square feet. And secondly, BAR staff has seen significant turnover recently, and the current staff has conflicting opinions on what constitutes extraneous information on signage submittals. Staff wanted to bring this to the board so that we might get your guidance and a general consensus on this issue moving forward. Staff recommendation, final approval.
Thank you, Allison. Mr. Goggins, did you want to respond to anything raised in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Just to say that the way the staff summarized the application is exactly our position. You know, we just want to make sure that we are able to explain what our business type is and what we hopefully can add to Charleston neighborhood. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Goggins. Okay, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
Go ahead, Bill.
Oh, I was just gonna just throw in one thing. I do agree with staff's position. I do have, I guess, one other quick thing I was noticing with the fact that the razor sign is basically, you know, applied secondarily to the primary sign. In some degree, that verbiage could be changed later on. I wanted to make sure, because I think you're seeing the merits in the razor sign because it identifies, you know, the fare at the restaurant, which I think is viable, but, you know, just wouldn't want to see that interchanged with something later. So I think that might be a qualification, if we go forward with staff's recommendation, maybe from the board, that particular verbiage is the reason we would be approving it, and it should be the only verbiage that really stays on the sign. So just throwing that out. Because I think what I'm basically saying is, in your determination, what's extraneous information, I see that, and I agree, identifying what the restaurant does is not, but if something extraneous got put on it, some verbiage it could be. So anyway, that's it.
And I have another question for the applicant, if I may, apologies. And for staff, has the existing, it looks like there's a good bit of signage on the window on the north elevation. Was that reviewed and approved? I just wanted to make sure. I mean, it's there now. You wouldn't see it in this photograph, but the windows on the north elevation have signage
I'm
like
sorry.
applied inside the glass.
Oh, you mean on the glass itself?
Mm-hmm.
And is your question whether that's been up for a board vote?
Just whether it's been reviewed by staff and approved. I was just curious because that also clarifies what what you serve and do.
I am not aware, but I believe so, and I can look into it and confirm. I am not sure.
Okay. Does staff have any recollection of that?
Vicky, I'm not sure if you,
I do not remember approving any other signage other than the red right angle sign that you're seeing there. I was trying to see if I could pull up the signage permit to see what was approved.
I just thought that'd be worth mentioning just so it could all be kind of resolved at once. In terms of the extra little panel that they'd like to add, I mean, I do, there is precedent in the immediate vicinity for a little bit of explanatory verbiage, like Magnolia's has several words under their logo. I don't think it's beyond the pale to ask for that. But I do think it's important for them to share with you their whole signage program and make sure that it's all approved.
And Glenn Gardner, I echo Julia in that I would ask to make sure that all of it is being reviewed as one signage package, and also I do agree with Bill in that, you know, if we were to approve this, I think we would need a condition that it is limited to this item, and it can't turn into, you know, kind of like the law offices that every time you start serving something new, there's a new little, you know, next year there's a dessert thing hanging under this, and then there's an ice cream thing under that. Like, it would be limited only to this particular 4-inch, I think, edition. I mean, ultimately, that's sort of a marketing thing with, if your logo doesn't say what you do, maybe the logo needs to include what you do and not have to tack it on separately. But I wish it were just part of the actual sign and not an add-on.
There's an egg on that shoe, Glenn. I see it.
There's an egg on the shoe.
Which I don't know that necessarily conveys what's going on inside this building, but because it gives a hint.
And to answer the board's previous question, the only thing I see in our system is this proposed sign. I don't see any window signage.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I would certainly, did anybody else have questions or comments?
No, Fillmore here. As submitted, I don't really have an issue with this. If the only signage is the red Ruby Sunshine sign, I think it's perfectly logical to have the addition of identifying what that means. But I do agree with Bill's comment and Julia's that it needs to be what's submitted to us, what we see here, without the ability to change it without further review. And I am interested in the signage that exists in the window. But I certainly don't have an objection to this sign as submitted.
I'll make an attempt at a motion if that's fair. I would like to make a motion for final approval of the signage as submitted, with that approval being limited to the exact verbiage and size of what has been submitted, and a condition on that final approval for staff review of any additional signage on the property.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for final approval of the signage as submitted, which is limited to the exact verbiage and size of what was submitted, and staff review of the window signage. Is that right, Glenn?
Correct.
Okay, and I have a second by Julia. Put it to a vote. Bill?
Yay in favor.
Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Goggins.
Thank you, board. And we will coordinate with staff on review of any window signage. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number 3, 42 Charlotte Street. Allison, if you'll give us an introduction and overview, please.
42 Charlotte, we have requests for preliminary approval for new construction of a duplex. This is in the Bolton Historic District, Bragboro, and here's context image. Listing site photos. Historic images of the house in the front of the property. And Sanborn maps. And I'll turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Mr. Hughley, you're on mute.
Here we go.
I can hear you now.
There we go. Yeah, now we're there. Hey, I'm John Paul Hughley. I'm the owner of the property. This is the duplex that's known as 42 Charlotte that sits behind 40 Charlotte. Allison, can you go to page 16? This is has been before you a couple of times. In July, you may remember we added a cross gable that was more, I think, controversial in the fact that the whole mass went up. Page 16, I think, is probably the easiest one to see. It was going to house above the front entrance. You may remember there was 3 kind of carriage doors across the front of the house, the building. And we pulled all that together with a front entrance with what was going to be our kitchen above. Let's stay there on that one. There was awnings going across the building. I think the flower bed walls were there, and there still seemed to be too much mass. This actually was one as we brought the mass down. Can we go to the page 17? So working with the staff and looking at options, we need to still keep Unit B's kitchen on the second floor, but take the cross gable out. You asked to give us preliminary approval if we can get the massing at least on down, and we were able to reduce the overall massing by about 13% on the main building by taking out the cross gable that goes all the way through the building to the back. However, in studying that, trying to get the kitchen, keep the kitchen on the second floor, and there's a large tree that you don't see here that's just to the right of the door, which we can see on, will you go to page 29? We needed to go back through zoning for a couple of things. One, in studying that tree that has had some damage and having an arborist here, we felt we need to push back just a little bit. Yeah, that's it. If you see the big tree in the front of the building there, it's on the east side of the building. We have been keeping a 25-foot setback to the back, not encroaching into that. We did that from the very beginning, working with our neighbors. But as we looked at the tree and studied the tree, but also removing the mass of the cross gable, we mimicked that front little entrance, that 6 foot pop out in the back. Now it's open below, but it gave us our kitchen in the back. Can you jump to page 18, maybe 17 again? So in back looking north, we were able to take the cross gable completely off, but we were able to add, let's go to right there. There you go. Perfect. This is facing south. This is what you would see if you were driving down the driveway. You would see the little conservatory to the left. You'll see only part of the roof. You probably won't even get a visual of the cupola, but the second story kitchen was above the entrance there in the previous one. We were able to take that off, that whole cross gable off. Can you go to like 19 or 20? Let's see where that leads us. Yeah, here it is in the back. So the back was just a solid flat plane besides the awnings. We took the awnings off as recommended. We took the flower beds walls off, but we pulled that, we mimicked that kind of entrance in the front on the back. Go to page 20 and see if that shows us. Yeah. So this is the back. It looks like the front, but below it's open. So where you see that chandelier below kind of gives you an understanding that's an outside chandelier. And then above that area is the kitchen that we, for the second floor unit. And so the comments before, I think, were eliminate the cross gable, number one, and get our mass down, which we have since about 13% for us. Number two was the conservatory. We can stay here on this one. The conservatory is the same on each side. Actually, go ahead and go, if you don't mind, go to page 13. So let's see it from plan view. So at the last meeting, y'all said simplify. This is an old conservatory on the left, much bigger, and the newer, more rectangular one we're proposing on the right. Will you go to page 14? Okay, there you see the previous one on the left, which was more of a 10-sided conservatory. And meeting with Kim and Tori in December, we were trying to understand, y'all asked us to restudy that. You deferred the conservatory and asked us to restudy it. What came out of that meeting was simplify, meaning let's make it a little bit more boxy, more rectangular, clip the corners, pull it away from the building, don't let it lean on the building, and let it have a little bit of a cricket in between it. So now can you go to, let's say 20. Yeah, let's go to page 20 and see where that leads us. Okay, one page back. There you start to see it. This is from the back. This is looking at from the rear again. It's been pulled away from the building. It's a little bit more freestanding. There is a clipped corner there. If you're kind of looking at it straight, you see the two panels, but it clips back, so it gives a little bit of relief. The reason the cricket is small, we have windows now on the west sides. It has to connect. We also lowered the lantern. Will you go back to, let's go back one page and see if we can get to it. There's the old one, the 10-sided one. It had double windows on the lantern, which I think Historic Charleston was one of the ones that said, can we pull the whole conservatory down a little bit, maybe lose one of those lantern windows, which we did. And maybe go back one more and let's see if we can get to it. Yeah, here it is previously leaning against the building, and now it's shorter, the lantern's smaller, and it's freestanding. And so on that, I don't know if we're there yet. There's definitely, you probably have seen the building drawings that the graduates are doing now on page 26 of it. But talking to Tori, I mean, the Preservation Society has come along. They said they're comfortable with it now. Historic Charleston was. We, of course, were comfortable with both. But we need to move the building on. We need to keep the building going. So Tori said, bring it before you guys, let you look at it. And then if you feel that if it's not going in the right direction, let's try to keep the building moving. And if we need to add this later, we can. We just don't want, we're not going to give that up. We just feel like we've gotten it to a place where we're comfortable with it. We want to know y'all's comments. Comment 3 and 4 of the board was remove the awnings across there. This page is fine. Page 18 is fine there. You can see the old awnings. We removed those and create a belt line, starting to get our detail more in. We've we've located our brick and we're bringing some of the brick details into it now. And then number 4 comment was the planter beds, which you can see here as well above. We've taken those down and started bringing in kind of a, for us, it will be a little brick detail that will be kind of like a, right at the edge and in the front entrance. The final comment I think came from the board with the cupola. Would it be a beacon of light? Would it be, what's its purpose? We did studies and we submitted those studies. They're attached in the, not in this document, they're in the Word document. I mean, it's just natural cooling. We know it's important for our sustainability to get that heat out. There are plenty of studies, and we included some of those studies to just show how buildings like this in the South can usually do night dumping. This is all electronic. These are Velux windows that literally open and close. If it rains, gets too hot, these aren't something we have to climb up and open and close. But what we did do is we brought back a shutter there to kind of, if there was a concern for like, if it was a beacon of light or bothering our neighbors, we hadn't had any complaints, but we wanted to, we thought that was a good direction. Okay, I think that's most of the comments that y'all had before. I'd like to hear your comments about the direction of the conservatory, and we're ready to get the main building moving. So please try to keep it moving forward, even if there's any concern with the conservatory. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hughley. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
This is Bill. I have one quick question, and maybe looking through the drawing set, John Paul, you might be able to give a reference to the sheet. Are there details, for example, wall section at the conservatory?
There, go to page 26. I'll show you what we did, Bill. This is Annie Arthur, one of our graduates that works with Bob Thomas here. So this is the structure. So don't look at the Chippendale. The Chippendale is just a strengthening band that's going to be solid from the front. But inside it, we thought it'd be interesting to, because these are such thin members, they're an 1.5 inches to give you an idea, Bill. This is all not tube. This is solid, very, we needed some real strength at that freeze, basically. So by using an Xing method, I was able to kind of create a strong band, if you will. So these are our construction drawings starting to move forward, but every time we do this, we tend to take 10 steps back because maybe the shape's not right. So I did want to move it on forward because we personally need to keep this moving. But that will give you an idea of how it be constructed. Anyway, we're gonna keep it very light. Actually, one more idea, Bill. Go to I don't know this page. Let me see if I can find it real quick, Allison. Yeah, go to page 21. So these were some inspirations. Don't weigh a lot on them. A lot of this was for discussion in our charrette that we did. The inspiration on the right is a very light glass box, and I loved it. I love the feel of it. The middle one is the one I didn't like. It's kind of showing them. I mean, I tell you what I like about it. I like the roof, but it's made of wood and it seems heavy. And so we were trying to land somewhere in between those two. And so when you think about it, this is going to just be like a floating glass, conservatory with, orange trees, citrus trees. You'll see right through the building. We met with our neighbor to make sure that the neighbor in the back doesn't feel like there's any light noise or, coming into their property. So I think lowering the lantern probably helps everybody, but I've assured them that, if there's any type of light coming out of there, we'll change it. But does that help, Bill?
Yeah. I guess one thing I was noting, and I do see that there's an internal steel frame, if you will, which is an interesting concept. The actual roof then would be framed in wood. Is that?
It's all this whole little.
It's part of that whole system.
Yeah. So the whole purpose of this building is that blacksmiths in Charleston only get known for iron gates and strap hinges, and we want them to have this little jewel box made completely by the blacksmiths, and that's why the roof has a little bit of curve or canter. That's why it's not.
So even the frame of the outer structure, the roof, if you will, would be the iron, and then you would be
outside. You won't see you'll see just standing seam. They'll just match.
Right. I guess I mean but the structure holding that up is also metal. Is what you're saying.
Page
Okay.
26, Allison.
That helps. I was just looking at that very complex in the back of where the side that meets the brick building, the way that pitch breaks separately, the curved pitch. So it's a pretty complex detail, but doing it in metal now, I can see where that is possible.
It's going to give them great challenges. I love it. I love the fact that they're going to have to figure this out. I would say our building,
complicated,
our engineering, our timber frame, our brick, the brick companies, all the stuff, we have just had to keep moving. So the next round, the staff or you guys will see all of the drawings for the construction of the inside if they want to see that. This little guy, we want to try to get the shape right before we keep redesigning it. So finally I just said, look, when Tori said go more rectangular, clip the corners, I finally just said, guys, go ahead and design it. So I worked with them on this thin this thin steel. So this is as far as we've gotten with this, if you want to call this a section, because there's not much to it. There's no insulation. There's no, it's just glass panels and some 1.5 inch steel.
Okay, great. Thanks a lot. Appreciate it.
May I ask a question about that, kind of in the same realm? So is the roof of that conservatory curved glass, or what is that roof?
It's standing seam metal, so it's the same as the house. And I don't know the color yet, I'll be honest. I've been working with metal companies to try to find a standing seam that looks like an old, like this main house has. It has a zinc look to it. So I can't afford copper, but it's going to be somewhere between copper and an old tin type roof. But it's all standing seam metal.
I'm sorry, I have one more question.
Yeah.
That site plan that you showed with the it looked like you relocated the footprint because of the tree. And that part of that was grayed in, I guess, as an encroachment. You've been through zoning and everything, right?
I did just last week, got full approval and kept my neighbors all happy, which was not easy.
Great. That's it. Thank you. Perfect.
29.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
We have Aaron Minnigan.
Thank you. Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society would like to thank the applicant for their continued communication with us on this project. We feel improvements have been made to the design and appreciate the applicant's responsiveness to our comments. At this time, we are comfortable with the project moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron. Frankie, do we have anyone else speaking from the public?
That's all we have signed up to speak.
Frankie, Allison, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Sure. So we have the previous staff comments from October and the previous motion, which was conditional approval for conceptual design of the primary building, incorporating staff comments and deferral on the conservatory for refinement and overall simplification, and a board comment to eliminate or restudy form and aesthetic of the cupola. And then our staff comments today. The massing was reduced and the cross gable was eliminated on the south elevation facing the street. However, the overall massing of the structure was increased by adding a 2-story projection to the north elevation. Although the overall massing was not decreased, there will be limited visibility of the north side, so staff is generally comfortable with the current massing. The conservatory appears to have been restudied and slightly lowered in height and massing. However, the connection to the primary structure, both in plan and roof, is overly complicated and needs to be worked out. The conservatory is now articulated as a separate entity, and the roof does not have the space to fully articulate, appearing off balance. Since the conservatory does not have conceptual approval and still appears to need simplification, staff recommends the removal of the conservatory portion from this proposal to be reconsidered at a later date so that the primary portion of the structure and this project can move forward. Number 3, the awning between the first and second stories has been eliminated, now locating the solar film on the dormer shed roofs on the south elevation only. Staff recommends relocating the solar film to the north elevation so they are not visible from the street. The north side dormer roofs are shallow pitch, so they may get as much sunlight as the south side or a comparable amount. Provide specifications and visual information on the solar film. Comment number 4, addressing the board comment of the previous motion. The cupola has been altered from windows to louvers. However, the overall form has not been restudied. Size and scale of the cupola needs to be clarified as it does not appear consistent throughout the drawings. The proportions on the sections are different than the proportions on the elevations. And finally, the need specific information on the lanterns and chandelier. Additional materials information is required for a preliminary approval, including windowsills and headers and material finishes. Staff recommendation is deferral for removal of the conservatory, clarification of details, materials, and finishes, and addressing staff comments.
Thank you, Allison. Mr. Hughley, did you want to respond to anything raised in the public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Sure. So the overall mass has reduced. It's on page 31. There's a complete study there. So we just added it up. So it definitely has reduced. So that makes everybody feel better. Solar film does not work on north sides ever. Solar film has to face south and at a degree of between 30 and 36 degrees to the sun. So we could just delete the whole solar if we need to, but we can't put it on the north side. It has to face south. The cupola, I'll check into that. I don't know what you're talking about with the size being different, but we of course restudied the cupola, and the cupola has changed in both sizes, both width and height from the previous. So I think them saying that it has not changed and it hasn't been restudied, it has been completely changed in all different sizes. But it sounds like there was a discrepancy in one of the drawings. I'll double check that. And what was the last one? I think that's it. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Hughley. All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
Would it be okay if I asked staff to kind of show us the cupola discrepancies that you mentioned? Just for...
I can get back there and remember.
Sorry, there's so many sheets.
I believe it was the scale on these sections versus the, I mean, there's not measurements provided, but versus the scale on these.
Okay, there's the measurements. So there. So they did drop, and there's the dimensions from the previous to this. I knew it was in there.
I think there was discrepancy on the sections maybe.
Just as a takeoff, are you saying?
Just as a what? I'm sorry?
Just since there's no dimension, just as a takeoff, if you're checking it, is that what you're saying?
Frankie, you're muted.
No, when we were comparing the drawings, it looked like the proportions were different.
Okay, I'll definitely check that on the sections, but I can tell you on the elevations, I've been over them a lot. If you go back to those, the dimensions are there and they should be, especially like right there. You can see the comparison. Everything has come down. And I don't think that was really the question before. The question was, what was the purpose of this? And this is a critical part of our sustainable approach to get the heat out. It's called night dumping. Usually they open and get the heat out of the building at night when you're doing natural cooling. So, and they're all automated. There's 2 of them actually in there. They're automated.
Okay. I'll start off and say that I appreciate staff's attention to this, and I'm pretty much aligned with them on all points. I personally would not have a problem with there being solar film facing the south, but otherwise I agree with you. And I believe we already gave conceptual approval for the primary structure. So if I were gonna try to make a motion for the primary structure, it would be, I guess, deferral with final review by staff, maybe. I'm just throwing that out there for people to think about. And then I definitely agree that the cupola is really not any simpler. I mean, the way that it connects to the building is extremely complex, and I would say not traditional, really. So I agree with staff that piece should be deferred for restudy and simplification and refinement of how it connects to the main structure.
And this is Bill. I think I agree with a lot of that summary, Julia, you are making. I'm comfortable with the main building. I do recognize from staff's comments that there's still a few component notes and other things missing for the full preliminary approval, but I would just say pending having those notes, I would be fine with this building and supporting it. And I do think if there's any reservation that I would have, it would just be potentially the conservatory. So I do see potentially, instead of, my suggestion might be, instead of deferring the entire thing, if we could defer in particular the conservatory portion. That's just my take, because I'm okay with what the main building is doing, and we could.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Bill, I was effectively doing that, I think,
That's what you're
effectively
saying?
considering
Okay.
that, like deferring the main building, but letting it go to final review by staff.
Oh,
So
final
that,
review by staff.
kind of.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. That way, those points that weren't addressed could be addressed to staff. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I agree, Julia.
Breathing now.
More here, I think I'm in agreement with Julia and I think now with Bill as well. I do not think there's enough information here for preliminary approval without some caveat. And so if the conservatory is deferred and sort of set that aside, generally speaking, I'm okay with the main building with some of the details. Like Julia, I think the issue with the solar film can be worked out. That's not a real problem for me. I think there is not enough information here for the board to grant preliminary approval, but a deferral, and if staff is okay with final review by staff, I think I would support that.
I agree for the most part with staff's position. I think the conservatory shouldn't be part of an approval or the current consideration. I am still very confused as to how it works and how it attaches, and I'm not comfortable with the roof form and the lack of balance of that roof form. I think that needs to be a very detailed, very careful submittal because that element is the most visible to the public realm. And I think that's critical to make sure that their team carefully designs it, carefully details it, and gets it right. And I don't think it is there yet. I understand what they're trying to do, but the finish line is not right in front of us on that. And I definitely echo the staff comment about the cupola. If you've tried on that, you need to try harder because you're not there yet. It, essentially moved by a couple inches, and now we're seeing louvers instead of glass, but I think glass is still under the louver. I think that element still just reads a bit out of scale and draws too much prominence to what has been billed as a secondary back building. I'm sure there are other venting methods, maybe, yeah, I mean, I'm not going to suggest, but I'm certain there are other ways to handle that with less prominence. Solar film wise, I don't think we can even talk about solar film until we know what the roof is, because we would need to see a sample of solar film on the roof, but we don't know what that roof material will be. And then I'm really, really looking for detailing on things, or not detailing, but explanation and development of things like, you're working on a beautiful building, but then there's a fireplace vent shown on the roof. And surely there are ways to work through things like that that don't seem to have been explored yet. So that's where I think the massing of this building is greatly improved. But I fully support the staff position with deferral for additional information to get to a preliminary level, because there are some critical details that really need to be developed that could be game changers in how the building functions and is built once those details are carefully considered.
This is Bill. Can I throw out one more point real quick? And Glenn, some of what you were saying got me thinking about this, and even the photographic examples presented by the applicant. As I recalled, the building was even going to have sort of a basement of sorts, being not in a flood zone. Maybe one thing that this is just a discussion potentially to something to maybe think about if incarnation of the conservatory continues. The one thing that just dawned on me that sort of kind of bothered me about it is the fact that it doesn't really communicate to the yard. The fact that I think the floor potentially of the conservatory itself could be lowered down, so you actually step out of the house down into the conservatory and then maybe another step or two down to the yard. Seeing communication to the yard, I think, might be a positive. At least I would see it as such in future incarnations if you were able to pull that off. So just throwing that out while I was thinking about it. So it sounds like, are you guys talking about maybe deferral of the conservatory wholesale and then deferral of the, call it cupola lantern element on the roof as well? And then, well, Julia, your motion actually handled that. Are we saying that staff could then deem, do you have enough reservation about the cupola element, or do you feel like staff could sort of clean it all up in one fell swoop for a final
I mean,
approval?
I'd like to think staff can, but I'm not sure. Yeah. You want to try a motion? Was that what you were doing?
Yeah, I was trying to get around to structuring a motion, and what I was trying to get at was kind of back to what you were saying. It's a deferral for the main building, but with final review by staff, and then just a straight up deferral for the conservatory for restudy per staff's comments and board comments.
I think I could be on board with that. I don't know about others.
I concur. I think that those items need to be clearly articulated, like the solar film, the venting, the fact that the cupola is not far enough along. But yeah, I mean, I'm comfortable with that concept.
And
Bill,
I
was
figured too, if there's any particular element that staff might have had a reservation about, they could always just bring it back to the board, any particular element as well. So was that good enough to be a motion, or do I have to say it again, Lindsay?
well, what I
You have
heard
to say it
was
again.
a motion for deferral of the main building, final review by staff, deferral of the conservatory for review, for restudy, per staff comments and board comments.
That's it.
I've got the
Indeed.
staff comments, but the board comments are not necessarily clear.
Here, let me try.
Do you mind if I interject? I know you're about to clarify the
Yeah.
motion, but
Go ahead,
from
Lori.
staff's perspective, if you do a deferral on a preliminary approval and then final review by staff, for clarity's sake, when does the preliminary approval happen? And are you putting the preliminary review and final review on staff? We just want to get clear direction too.
That's what it would be, Tori, and it's just because there's the technicality that they're missing a little bit of the required information for preliminary. So just as a technicality, we're, sending it to you so that box can be checked, but effectively otherwise we're kind of green lighting the main building, I think, right? You guys agree?
Yeah.
I think that's correct, Julia, with the knowledge of the comfort level with the conservatory and the cupola. I mean, I think how I'm interpreting the motion is that with further detailing, the main building would move forward without the cupola and without the conservatory. If the conservatory and the cupola are in play, then that changes the building, or at least that's how I'm interpreting that.
So would we be giving a conditional preliminary approval today, being the conditions are that they submit the additional detail to staff?
That works.
The cupola is not included, and the cupola is deferred, and the conservatory is deferred. Is that, we're trying to give a conditional preliminary approval today?
Yeah, I was trying to get some kind of, that's why I like Julia's motion. It can keep things moving. Definitely on this main building, which is going to require a lot of detailing. Could keep that moving. So that's why. And I think Julia, you made a really good point too about the only difference between us approving this preliminary was the fact that just the submittal wasn't complete. So I think the idea would be for the applicant to quickly complete the preliminary information, get it to staff, get that quick approval, and knowing that there's a final review by staff for the other details.
Yeah, and then if they wanted to add, Bill, the conservatory and the cupola back into their final package, then that I would think could come to the board
Sure.
to be reviewed as the final package.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Fillmore here. I think I'm generally in agreement with the way this discussion is going. I do think that, to Glenn's point, that the detailing on this is important. And so I think it's a little more than the technicality of adding notes to the drawing. I think that I am, if staff is comfortable undertaking that challenge, then I think I am comfortable with, as it's been presented, excluding the conservatory and the cupola, and the body of the main building being deferred, with then staff determining when it's appropriate for preliminary. But I think that preliminary approval is dependent on a lot of detailing, some detailing which could or could possibly not deny preliminary approval.
But can I try a slightly different variation on this this idea? What if I make a motion for conditional preliminary approval of the main structure with staff comments, which fully clarify the technicality that's missing, right? And then they could bring it back and then say deferral of the cupola and the conservatory for restudy and clarification of restudy and simplification and refinement of connection to the primary structure that pertains to the conservatory.
I think that sounds logical, Julia. I mean, I think we're trying to put enough power in the hands of the applicant to decide how they want to move forward with some of these details. And I think there's a fast track here and there's a continue refining track, and I like leaving that up to them to decide how they want to handle that, if that's a fair way to think about it. Because I know, I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I know they are anxious to move forward with detailing and all of that. And
yeah,
that would allow, I would think this would allow a path, you know, on the main building to move forward.
right. And that, yeah, we've all spent a lot of time on this project.
Yeah.
So I think nobody wants it to lag.
That's for sure.
Yeah, so.
I'll read back what I think is your motion, Julie.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor for conditional approval of the main structure with staff comments noted. Deferral of the cupola and conservatory for restudy, simplification, and refinement of the connection of the conservatory to the primary structure. Actually, so both the cupola and conservatory need to be restudied time. But specifically with reference to the conservatory, it needs to be refined in connection to the primary structure.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right.
Okay, I'm going to interject one more time, and I'm sorry because I want to get it before the vote. So preliminary approval are materials and detailing, and that is what's being deferred into staff's hands for the primary building, with the exception of the cupola and the conservatory. So we will look at materials, detailing, and textures and colors at staff. And then if the other two elements are pushed, that will come back for a second preliminary review. Conceptual, because those two elements don't have conceptual review. So that would bring those two elements back in for conceptual.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's where we are. I mean, this has been piecemeal together for months, and I know we're trying to find a way for it to continue moving. It's not ideal.
Well, Tori, actually, I don't think we didn't do final review by staff or anything. So they could go ahead and resubmit once they give you the technical information you need to be able to check the box and say your preliminary approval is done. Then they could go back and work toward final and also refine the conservatory and do the things we're asking and submit it all one more time and maybe ask for final at that point, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. I think that helped, Julia. I think that helped me understand where we are. If
I don't want to make it a nightmare for staff. I know it's really tough to juggle all these little elements of one project.
So Tori, are you comfortable with that motion? I mean, as far as handling what we're calling final preliminary, the final review of the preliminary.
Well, I mean, if I'm going to be real honest, I'm a little bit uncomfortable, but we will do whatever the board directs.
You know what? Let's just make it preliminary approval, because your comments tell them what they're missing, and with board comments, there you go. So how about that? Is everybody okay with that?
Well, okay, here's kind of where we're at. We don't feel like it has the information it needs for preliminary approval. If we're studying details and materials, it's, I think that if the applicant would break it into some pieces, that would help the building move forward while the conservatory could figure out its place. And that's exactly what you guys have done. So I think that's great. We're happy to look at the materials and details. I just don't think that they're in this package. So we could go either way, honestly. It's fine either way.
And
right.
Tori, I think you know that anytime, like, if we're saying that y'all are able to do it at staff, then that's fine. But if y'all feel like you need our guidance, then it's your decision to say, no, we're going to have the board review this. I mean, I think we can trust y'all to make that call if that's a fair thing to consider.
That's good. Yeah.
We're giving the staff authority to give final preliminary approval, basically.
If they're comfortable, yeah.
Yeah, they can always, you can always elevate it back to us and not give final preliminary. You can put it on us to give final preliminary.
Okay. Yeah, we'll take a stab. We'll take a stab at it. We'll work with John Paul. Thanks.
So if is that motion still on the floor table?
It is.
I will second that motion.
Thank you, Glenn. I'll put it to a vote. Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
Fillmore?
Nay, not in favor.
Okay. Julia?
Yay, in favor.
Glenn?
Yay, in favor.
Chair votes with the majority and the motion passes 4 and 1 against. Thank you, Mr. Hughley.
Thank you so much.
Okay, agenda item number 4, 138 and 140 Wentworth Street. Allison, if you'll give us an introduction and overview, please.
Sure. Okay. 138 and 140 Wentworth Street. This is request for conceptual approval for alterations to a historic house and bathhouse, and being a new side porch on the house and exterior stair on the bathhouse, and the construction of a pool house. Hardscaping alterations included as well. This is a category 1 and 3 in Harleston Village, circa 1840 in the Old and Historic District. Here are some context aerial images. This property, existing site photos. Down the street. Sanborn maps showing the house and the bathhouse in 1884 and 1955. Historic images. And I'll turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Hello, Rachel and Lucas Boyd here with Boyd Architects. We are requesting a 5-minute extension to the 10-minute speaking time since we are sharing this presentation with Nate, the landscape architect. So the project is 138 and 140 Wentworth. 138 Wentworth is a residence completed in 1842. The house has seen many usages over the years, but the current owners will be restoring it to a single family home. Next slide. So here's a survey, there we go. Here's a survey showing the historic structure in the front, historic octagonal bathhouse at the rear, and a detached garage at the rear, completed in the 1980s. Next. So here's some historic information and Sanborn maps for your review. Next page. So here's some photos of the main house. The aerial photo on the top left shows the original asymmetric T-shaped plan hatched in red. A 1-story rear addition and 2-story hyphen connecting the main house to that addition were added by 1902 per the Sanborn maps. In the 1970s, the L-shaped piazza was infilled and a small 1-story addition was added to fill the space between the piazza and the previous additions. Next page. So here's some photos of the east and rear facades of the main house. Next. Some photos of the historic bathhouse along the top and photos of the garage from the 80s along the bottom. Next. And if you could go ahead to the next page, page 8. So here's the proposed site plan with exterior changes called out. You will see a new pool house has been proposed for the west lot, currently 140 Wentworth. The landscape architect will elaborate on the landscape changes shortly. So let's just go ahead to the next page.
So this is Lucas Boyd now. We'll move quickly through the plan since the exterior changes are much easier to see in elevations. But here's the existing first floor plan of the main house. Throughout the presentation, areas with BAR relevant changes are highlighted in red in the existing plans and elevations. So next. The modifications to the main house are in general quite focused, and many are not visible from the street. On the first floor, we're proposing some changes to the existing openings and a new side porch. Next. Here's the existing second floor plan. Next. The proposed second floor plan has minimal changes beyond the roof of that new side porch and the elimination of a non-original chimney at one of the rear additions. Next. Existing roof plan. Next. And the proposed roof plan showing those same changes as the second floor plan. So next. Here's the existing garage plans. Next. And again, we'll focus on the exterior revisions when we get to the elevations, but you'll see we've proposed eliminating the side porch. Next. And the bathhouse existing plans. Most of the exterior changes here are a result of the reprogramming of the interior. So next. And here's the proposed. So the ground floor will be used as a private guest suite, and the second floor will be used as an office. And given that, we're proposing the removal of the interior stair and adding a stair to the exterior. The interior stair is currently very, very small in both width and headroom. So yeah, next. Now we'll get into the elevation, starting with the existing front or south elevation of the main house. Next. So we're proposing the replacement of all existing windows, which are not original, with wood windows that are period appropriate. Beyond that, the only proposed change on the front is the replacement of the entry door's interior panel with a full light. Based on its detailing, we don't believe that the door, and especially its solid panel, are original to the house. Next. Moving along to the existing east or side elevation. Next. These proposed changes are minimally visible from the street, if at all. We're proposing replacing 2 windows with French doors to make better use of the existing terrace. We're also proposing the demolition of a non-original chimney, as mentioned earlier, at that rear addition. Next. Here's the existing rear or north elevation. Next. To the left, you'll see another new French door on the east terrace for a total of 3 French doors. And at the rear facade of the addition, an existing stair and rear door will be removed and replaced with a window. To the right of that, you'll see both a new stair and the new side porch, both of which we'll look at on the west elevation. So next. So here's the existing west elevation. This is where the bulk of the main house exterior changes are happening. So next. So let's focus on the rear entrance to the left first. We're proposing a new full light entry door with a new code compliant stair and landing. The existing overhang standing seam roof will be painted to match the new side porch, the roof of the side porch. This new roof color is one of the ways we're trying to bring some consistency to the 4 structures on the property. And for the new side porch, let's go to the next page. So here's a rendering of the proposed new side porch. There's several architectural themes that are taken from the existing historic building. So if I could direct your attention to the top row of images. First, the monumentality of the existing structure's form, complemented with the more delicate wrought iron elements throughout. Second, these are further contrasted with the monumental being white and the metalwork being dark gray or black. Third, we'd also like to reference the various curves and radii that are present throughout the home, which soften the geometric formality of the house. And finally, symmetry and strong axes are key themes throughout the main house. So the new proposed side porch we're proposing is trying to pick up on these themes. The roof rests on top of the existing engaged columns from the original piazza. We've added curved metal brackets and a curved handrail picket detail to reference the lunette transoms behind. And all in all, we feel the design respects the historic structure while not mimicking the Greek Revival style. Next.
Rachel Boyd here. Moving on to the existing elevations of the garage. Next. So the proposed design includes removing the existing side porch, which is currently in disrepair. We've also added a new side hinged outswing garage door with new entrance canopies over the doors. Next. Here we have the existing elevation. Next. So you'll see that side porch is gone and there are some modifications to existing openings as well. Next. Existing west elevation and next. So we're proposing a new hand crimped standing seam roof. Next. So this rendering shows the same roof color as the interventions on the west facade of the main house. We're also proposing the same white versus dark gray color palette using a white mineral paint to add some visual interest to the essentially unremarkable existing brick. You also see we are proposing curved brackets at the door overhangs to reference the curved brackets on the new side porch. So while the structure is very different from the main house, there are threads of consistency between them. Next. So moving on to the existing elevations of the bathhouse, a really unique structure. This bathhouse does, however, have limited visibility from the street. Next. So we have modified some openings on the ground floor, and again, throughout, we're proposing replacing the windows with period appropriate new windows. We'd also like to replace the existing roof so that we can insulate the structure. Inside, there's this really beautiful vaulted ceiling, as you will see in one of the top photos. The structural thickness of the roof over the space is very, very small, so we'll need to insulate from the exterior in order to preserve the vault. However, we'd like to go in with a hand-crimped, period-appropriate metal roof. We can also explore tapering the insulation so that the eave detail remains virtually unchanged. And the roof would be the same dark gray color shown on the main house porch and the garage. So again, some visual consistency between the multiple structures. And as you can see in the photo on the right at the top, this dark gray roof color does have precedent in the neighborhood. This is the house directly adjacent on Wentworth. And finally, we're proposing a new exterior stair, which we'll discuss shortly. Next page. Here are the other existing elevations of the bathhouse. And if you could just skip ahead to page 39. So this conceptual 3D view shows our intent for the new exterior stair. The existing second floor has a metal picket detail, as you'll see in the photos above. The new stair would have matching simple pickets with wood treads and landing. And by placing the stair on this facet of the octagon and plan, we have the fewest changes to the historic fabric possible. So for example, we can use the existing entry door on the second floor porch instead of adding a new entry door. Next.
I'd like to note for the applicant, we're at 10 minutes. I know you all had requested some additional time and that you're sharing it and that the landscape architect still needs to present. So I just want to, I'll entertain a few more minutes, but I just want you to be mindful of the time.
Okay, thank you. We can move quickly through this. So here are the proposed plans for the new pool house. It's a simple dog trot style structure, 2 set volumes separated by a breezeway. This form and its placement in the site plan help reinforce an existing implicit division between the front yard and the backyard that is currently only defined by a gate. So this breezeway is kind of a portal between the new front lawn and the new rear pool. So if you guys want to skip ahead to page 45, and look directly at the renderings. So for the pool house design, we are again taking some cues from the historic main house. If I could direct your attention to the top row of photos, we're referencing the white versus dark gray color palette of the main house, as well as its formal symmetry. The main house is characterized by dentil molding and recessed panels between engaged pilasters. And so you'll see we're proposing brick with white mineral paint to match the new garage design. You also see the same hand crimp roof color discussed previously, as well as recessed brick panels between engaged brick piers. And finally, you'll see an abstracted reference to the dentil molding through an alternating soldier coarse brick detail at the eave. And you'll see there's a climber vine cable system planned for the front facade. Overall, we feel this is a simple structure that will age well and complement the palatial Greek Revival home while remaining subservient to it. Next page. And these are just the street elevations for your review. And with that, we'll hand it off to Nate, the landscape architect.
Thanks, Rachel. This is Nate. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. L101, please. I'm going to read a statement in the interest of time. My name is Nate Dittman, representing Remark Studio. Thank you to the board. I'd also like to thank April Wood and Aaron Minnigan for their time on the 13th of this month and their follow-up statements. From the start, we've been excited that the Randazzo's program for this property is first single-family oriented. In doing so, they'd like to preserve historic site qualities and remove unfortunate later modifications. For our scope, this greatly reduces the existing impervious hardscape. L102, please. From the street, the existing wrought iron fence and Simmons gates will be preserved and restored. The existing drive gate at the northwest corner of the original massing will be preserved on site as well. It'll just be moved toward Wentworth, aligning with the southwest pilaster of the original massing. And that fence is in the upper right. The pedestrian and drive gates accessing 140 Wentworth did not exist prior to the Fontaine Hancock's acquisition of the property following Hugo. Though the home at 140 is now gone, the new owners want to keep the spatial relationship that characterizes the street and neighboring properties in Harleston Village. Instead of demolishing the wall or attempting to match non-historic brick, we propose the existing drive gate and pedestrian gate be replaced with wood gates, styled similarly to nearby neighbors. That'd be solid with spindles above. This will provide some desired privacy without a solid wall. See images on L104 in our set for this. And there are no shortage of gates of this style and scale in the neighborhood, in the immediate blocks surrounding. Can you please go back to 101? The concrete semicircle and West Drive entry are expansive and in poor condition. The semicircle drive is currently greater than 14 feet wide at the narrowest, and we propose narrowing to 12 feet. On L103, at both drive gates, we're proposing tabby aprons that transition to crushed oyster shell with brick header borders throughout. The existing hardscape is extensive and we propose significantly increased permeability throughout the site. I think we're 5,800 or so square feet reduction in impervious surfaces. So still on L103, at the western parcel, we propose the stamped concrete parking area to be removed entirely, replaced with play lawn and garden extending south from the pool house. The parking area of service to Fontaine House and their neighbors at 142 favor removal of this parking lot. The drive court between the home and garage will be tabby with brick border, and new narrow brick paths will provide access to the former bathhouse and east face of the garage. We proposed removal of the sprawling, incongruous hardscape surrounding the former bathhouse as well. At the east side of the home, the owners would like to keep and restore the patio, tile, and piers. The existing lower brick terrace and fountain will remain in place as well. Last, we propose removal of the existing 10-foot chain link fence neighboring 21 Pitt Street, replacing the full length with a masonry stucco wall. Mr. Craig Kettles of 21.5 Pitt Street considers the chain link an eyesore and is enthusiastic about the proposed wall and the greater site plan. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Dickman. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
I have a quick question. The material that you're proposing for the roof replacement at the bathhouse is what exactly? Is like a galvalume, or I'm just curious about that.
The exact material, we haven't gotten into that yet, but it'll be a hand crimped standing seam metal roof. You're talking about well, all the roofs are going to be that, but you're talking about the octagon building, right?
Mm-hmm.
Any other board questions at this time? Did that answer your question, Julia? You're good.
No.
All right, I'll open it up for public comments. Frankie, I see a letter from the Harleston Village Association, but I'm not sure if they're here to read it or if anyone else is speaking.
We do have other people signed up to speak, but I don't believe anyone from the Harleston Village Association is signed up. At least Mr. Hudgens is not.
Okay, I'll read it after we get through the anyone speaking.
One of our applicants or one of our public speakers would like to go after you read the letter.
Okay,
So first we have Erin Minnigan.
Thank you. Erin Minnigan with the Preservation Society of Charleston. We would first like to thank the applicant for inviting us out to tour the property and discuss the project. This is a unique site in the heart of the Harleston Village neighborhood, and we are encouraged to see this proposal come forward and address deferred maintenance needs. Generally, we feel this is a positive project that will enhance the property, but would offer some comments for consideration. First, while previous alterations are not required to be reversed, we would encourage the owners to consider restorative measures such as opening up the piazza and upper floor of the bathhouse, as well as retaining interior wall configurations that would allow for those areas to be reversed in the future. But seeing as those are to be kept in this proposal, we would suggest that the porch proposed off of the enclosed piazza be reduced in depth to not exceed the plane of the primary building in front, and to lighten up the frame and details to help mitigate its visibility and impact on the historic structure. A couple of other minor notes on the main house would be to continue study of the front door, which may not be historically appropriate as a glass panel door unless evidence can be produced otherwise, and to conduct a thorough window condition survey to understand the necessity of the extent of window replacement versus repair. The bathhouse is a unique building type in the city, and significant consideration should be placed on its preservation. At this time, we are not supportive of the proposal to remove the existing term metal roofing to install insulation, which would alter the dimension of the roof and eave profile. Also, while we generally don't oppose color change as a reversible measure, we would encourage strong consideration for retaining the tinner's red color of the roof. This is highly characteristic of turn metal roofs and suits the roof's playful form, which is the most visible part of this building. Otherwise, we are supportive of the modifications to the garage and site plan, as well as the accessory pool house, all of which we feel complements the character of the site, and look forward to seeing this project progress. Thank you.
thank you, Erin. Frankie, do we have anyone else speaking from the public other than the individual who wants to speak after I read the letter?
No.
Okay. I'll go ahead and read a letter from the Harleston Village Association dated January 24th, 2022. Dear board members, the Harleston Village Association Zoning and BAR Subcommittee has, following an on-site meeting with the project architect and contractor, reviewed plans for the request to be heard on January 27th for conceptual approval for alterations to the antebellum house at 138 Wentworth Street and its unique bathhouse. We applaud the applicant's commitment to the renovation of this important house and its setting and their proposal to retain the open yard that adjoins the house. Overall, these proposals are, we think, welcome. We do have concerns about several aspects of the project and their effect on the retention of significant historic elements. First, the porch proposed for the west of the house is, as proposed, visually too heavy. We recommend that this element be restudied. While the proposed porch honors the surviving rhythm of the historic piazza, we also urge the owners to retain remaining historic fabric so that some future owner can reopen and restore this historic piazza in its original configuration with its original historical elements. Second, the proposal to replace the existing solid panel door with a glazed door strikes us as inappropriate for the architectural character of this house and comparable houses in the historic district. If the existing door is determined not to be original to the new house, a new door compatible and designed to the classical revival style of the house is, we think, a preferable solution. Third, we note that the proposal calls for replacement of exterior windows. Shop drawings of the proposed new windows should be submitted for review and comment before final approval. Fourth, we note that the red sandstone paving of the front terrace sheltered by the double height portico has settled. Should repairs be necessary to this terrace or should the need to level the terrace during renovations occur, we respectfully request that the historic pavers now in place, one of the important character defining features of the grand entrance to this house, be retained. Fifth, much of our concern centers on changes proposed for the bathhouse at the rear of the property. Unique in Harleston Village and perhaps in the historic district, this bathhouse is an important architectural element for the property and an important point of connection to lost domestic routines for which few tangible traces survive. Our concern centers on the removal of the historic stair to the second floor of the bathhouse, the replacement of this stair with a new exterior stair, the removal of an interior structural wall on the second level to accommodate the new stair, and the removal of the existing metal roof to allow installation of an insulation system which will require a significant alteration of the historic roof and eave profile. We recommend a thorough restudy of the bathhouse that brings to this building a higher level of concern for retention of historic fabric. We have similar concern for loss of historic interior fabric. We acknowledge that interior plans and proposals are not the purview of this board, but state for the record our regret that current plans call for the removal of a portion of a historic partition wall and the loss of 2 fireplaces and surrounding walls. It should be noted that the fireplace walls in question, though not currently visible from the exterior due to a previous piazza enclosure, are part of the original building. We commend the owners for the general direction of their proposal, the improvements will make to this property. We do, however, encourage them to adopt a more preservation-minded approach where their current plans call for the irreversible demolition and loss of historic elements and historic architectural fabric. Yours sincerely, on behalf of Harleston Village Association, Carter L. Hudgens, 70 Bull Street. And Frankie, do we have the member of the public who wants to speak at this point?
Yes, last we have April Wood.
Oh, okay.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. I apologize. I thought that Harleston Village was speaking and not being read, so I'm sorry about the confusion. Historic Charleston Foundation has reviewed the request for conceptual approval for alterations to the historic house and bathhouse at 138 Wentworth Street. We thank the applicant for their time at the site and then in follow-up phone conversations. We've been concerned about the fate of this important property in Harleston Village for several years, and we are thrilled that the applicant is taking on this project as a single-family residence and retaining the western parcel as a garden. We also commend the applicant for their thorough analysis of the property and submittal. Harleston Village Association has shared their comments with HCF, and we are aligned with their well-articulated comments. The proposed glass panel on the prominent front door is not historically appropriate, and we recommend that a more period-appropriate door should be installed. The historic bathhouse is a unique treasure to this property and to Charleston as a whole. Any work on this structure should be carefully considered. We've heard several comments about the roof alterations to accommodate insulation. We suggest that this approach should be studied carefully, and the applicant should provide stronger justification for this request. For such a unique and important historic structure, it is important to retain the historic material and detailing as much as possible. Regarding the currently enclosed piazza, we would obviously prefer to see the original piazza opened up and restored and that space be utilized as the covered outdoor space. However, we acknowledge this is outside the control of the BAR. While we have no objection to the architectural design of the porch, we believe the structure would be more successful as a freestanding pergola-type garden structure. We are also concerned that this element projects beyond the width of the front portion of the house. We suggest that this area is restudied. Regarding the garden plans, we would like to see drawings of the proposed driveway gate at the curb cut for the western parcel. We believe that a wooden gate would be appropriate and suggest that the applicant consider painting the non-historic brick walls to further differentiate them from the historic walls and ironwork of the historic house. We are in support of the garden plan overall, the reduction of impervious surfaces, as well as the pool house. While we are in strong support of this project, we think additional tweaks are needed, especially considering that this is a Category 1 building. We are hopeful that our comments are helpful as the project continues to be refined. Thank you.
Thank you, April. And Frankie, that's it for public comment?
That's all we have for the public.
Okay. Allison, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Sure. Staff comment number 1, glass panel replacement of the front door would not be appropriate to this high style Greek revival style structure. A solid wood panel door would be more period appropriate. Number 2, at the west porch pergola, we appreciate the nod to the arches and the removal to above the arch windows, but it feels very industrial and prefabricated. Number 3, at the west porch pergola, the columns and beams feel very dark and heavy as opposed to the light, lacy, delicate styles of the examples provided. pergola has some curved brackets that are delicate, but they seem to disappear because of the heavy beams and columns. Adding piercing details or some type of relief to the columns would be preferred, possibly change the roof type or angle to lighten the overall appearance. Number 4, the garage is a modern 1985 structure. However, BAR typically discourages painting brick, even when not historic. We suggest a wash rather than a paint. Number 5, at the garage, the awning feels less industrial than the pergola structure due to the curved brackets. Perhaps this aesthetic can be incorporated into the west porch pergola. Number 6, only the second story and roof of the bathhouse have limited visibility from the right of way. The hand crimped metal roof replacement on the bathhouse is appropriate, and staff was agreeable with these changes. Number 7, while the pool house design is simple, clean, and nicely subdued against the existing buildings, we think that the overhang should be increased to better coordinate with other secondary buildings on the property. Number 8, regarding the application of a climber vine system, staff is concerned about the long-term effects of the vines growing directly on the brick. Staff recommendation, deferral of the west porch pergola and main house front door for restudy, conceptual approval for other alterations to the house and bathhouse, and conceptual approval with board and staff comments for the garage and pool house.
Thank you, Allison. Mr. and Mrs. Boyd and Mr. Dittman, did you all want to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Sure. Maybe just for the public comments, just kind of administrative at this point, but the one comment from the Harleston Village folks was about the bathhouse. That was all directed towards a previous scheme, actually. After we met with them, we changed it. And so they're actually referencing a different scheme where we're actually proposing a new entry door in that second story facade rather than repurposing the porch entry. And the stair was in a different location and everything. So I just thought that might be important to know.
One of their comments is the removal of an interior structural wall on the second level to accommodate a new stair. This was the previous location of the stair that they're addressing. We have since moved the stair to address this specific comment, just a heads up.
Thank you. Did you have any other response or to the public comment or the city staff comments?
Well, there was a couple people that recommended decreasing the depth of that side porch, and obviously it sounds like we're gonna be restudying that anyways. But by decreasing the depth of that porch such that it's behind the current line of the existing house there, it wouldn't be much of a porch anymore. So again, worth noting, it's pretty thin as of now, just to stay away from the driveway. But if we decreased it more, it wouldn't be very usable. Anything else?
I think that's it.
All right. Thank you both. I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
Real quick, this is Bill. I have just a quick question of Tori. In the staff comments, wanted to make sure I saw this right. Are you saying in staff comment number 6 that the bathhouse, maybe the lower elements of the bathhouse proposed, such as the stair, are not visible from the right of way? In other words, are they in our purview or not?
Well, if they're visible, they're in your purview. And we felt like, as we kind of go around those streets, we felt like it's the roof and the second story that's most visible. So, in some ways you will see the top portion of the stair, like where the landing is and the railing, but we had trouble determining any visibility for the first floor. In addition, the pool house, if approved, is going to be another screening element. While it is a one-story element, it's going to be another screening element from Wentworth Street.
So do we review the steps or not at the bathhouse?
In my opinion, yes, I would say you review the steps, because here's why. the top half, maybe the top third is visible, limited visibility from Wentworth, and then from, as you come around Smith, you might get a little bit of a glimpse. So I would keep my review to the top half of it, and because that does involve the rail at the top landing, I mean, it sort of incorporates the top of the stair.
And then,
Okay, thank
Tori,
you.
to kind of build on Bill's question, I mean, to me, I guess, I mean, really that's partial demolition or selective demolition on a historic structure. So I think that, to me, Bill, I think that is a review item based on the fact that it is, demolition.
Bill Moore here. Yeah, thanks, Glenn and Bill. That was my question to staff as well. I have another question for staff, just for clarification. The two windows on the east elevation that are to be turned into French doors, does staff think that those are the original, are that the location, not necessarily the existing windows, but the location and size of those openings are original to the building?
I thought you were going to ask him about visibility for that one. Allison or Frankie may have to jump in
as well. I mean, because that's obviously critical.
Sure. I felt like that one.
Sorry, Tori.
Even more limited visibility, but Allison, why don't you jump in on the other part of that question?
Right. I think Frankie and I had felt that those actually weren't going to be in our purview because we couldn't find visibility of those from the right of way.
Okay, so those that modification then is, we're not considering that.
I think that's correct.
Yes.
I want to clear that. Okay, thanks.
I'll add that our recommendation includes conceptual approval for those other remaining alterations on the house, not including the front door. And that's the way we handled it. We did not see purview on that specific element. And so we lumped it in that way.
Okay, thanks.
We're in board commentary, right?
Yeah.
I'll go ahead and jump and get mine done here. Yeah, there are a lot of parts and pieces to this, a lot of positive things that I see. I do agree that there may be extenuating issues with the bathhouse. And actually, maybe if I can go through, can you guys flip back to the, yeah, there you go. Staff comment, first page. There we go. Thank you. I agree with staff comment number one. So regarding the west porch, I think I would feel this way. We heard from several commentary, including staff's comment, that everything appears to be too heavy. I agree with that, but I do think to the point that if the structure was lightened up to almost a delicate mode, that I could be okay with the extension past that corner to make it a viable porch. So that's my comment about 2 and 3. I actually thought I heard April mention painting the brick was a positive thing. And maybe I heard that incorrectly, but I think with this mineral paint, I really don't have a problem. That building is not very attractive at all and really needs, especially the old garage, 85 garage. I think I don't have a problem with it. And I'm appreciative of the design of the pool house. I think that's a very well conceived and executed design. So I would basically think, picking this apart by comments, probably I would definitely be behind supporting these comments and recommendation, especially breaking down the project into different approvable parts. The only thing that I believe the board may want to deliberate a little more would be the bathhouse, which staff I believe is recommended for approval. I'm on the fence about that, so I'd really like to hear what you guys think about that one. That's all I have.
Bill Moore here, Bill. I have certainly do have a problem with I think with the modifications to the bathhouse, first of all, if the roof is in our purview, I would not want to see a standing seam, intact, turn standing seam roof taken off and replaced with galvalume or some other material without further indications of the necessity of that. And so I'm struggling with that. I also am struggling with the exterior stairs. A significant visual change to that, even though it may not be visible if it's partially visible within our purview. I do not believe I would support that change. I'm on board with staff's assessment of the porch. On the west, I'm a little up in the air about the extension beyond the plane of the house. I think I would like to hear other opinions on that, but I agree with the rest of staff's comments about the porch on the west elevation. I'm with you, Bill. I think if that 1980s garage is painted with mineral paint, it's probably just fine. And I do kind of agree with staff's comment about the vine on the pool house. We know what big vine does to mortar joints. So I understand that caution.
All right, I'll jump in. I think it's a really lovely property, and I think these applicants have done a good job, addressing all of the parts and pieces. I think I tend to agree with staff and everybody else about the roof of the bathhouse. I think that's a really special little roof, and I've just seen examples of people insulating from the exterior and the way that it changes the eave conditions, and it's just it's odd, and if it can be avoided, that would be ideal. And then the reason I asked about the material that you're using is that I would think, and I would like Fillmore's opinion and Bill's too, I would think you would need to use something like copper in order to even consider replacing that roof, because it's so complicated and there's so many curves going on. But I agree that mineral paint on the garage would be just fine, in my opinion. I think the pool house design is strong and elegant. I'm fine with the minimal eave overhangs. And I don't know what kind of power we really have to dictate vine, growth or lack thereof. I'm a little ambivalent about that particular thing, because it does, while it lasts and while it's maintained well, it will be really attractive there. And then I can see the case for just sort of lightening up the west side porch structure. And I too am ambivalent about the depth of it. I think sometimes we cling to the depth of what's already existing in plan, but that doesn't necessarily translate into invisibility when you're walking down the street. So I don't know that it would make a giant difference to the public if it extended a little bit beyond the current plane of the plan. Yeah, but generally that's all I've got, and generally I think it's pretty great.
I feel like I'm interjecting. I'm sorry, Glenn.
No, go ahead.
I feel like I'm interjecting a lot. I'm sorry. We dissected visibility from a few streets from Google Street View, and if it might be a good idea to request a sightline study or photographs from some of those open gaping holes, that could be an option too.
Glenn Gardner, I'll keep my comments relatively brief as to not repeat anything too much. Generally, I am in line with a lot of the other comments that have been made. I think the neighborhood association has a very thorough assessment of the project, and my comments would be greatly aligned with a lot of what the neighborhood association as well as Preservation Society had to say. I do think that, I mean, unless that building in the back, unless the bathhouse is different from something that I toured a number of years ago, that building is rather sacred. And I think there's a lot more to that building than is really visible in the photographs. So I would be highly opposed to changing the roof and the stairwell on that building. And I think, as Julia mentioned, I believe if the roof itself material needed to be changed and updated on that building, I do think copper or lead-coated copper would likely be the only things you could consider replacing that roof with. I don't think there is any great list of items to consider, especially no modern items on that. I don't disagree with regard to the tinner's red on that roof as well. We have certainly had applicants come before us in the past who have installed copper roofs and then painted them tinner's red to keep the color. The landscape plan, I think, is nice. I have no objection at all to the wood gate request to the pool house. And I am okay with the mineral paint on the more modern garage building over to the left. And then I do agree, to wrap my comments up, I think that the new porch request is a bit heavy and a bit stark. And while it shouldn't necessarily match the detailing of the original house, I do think it is a bit dated and a bit too modern and simplistic feeling to my eye to really feel appropriate on this house. And I do know that that back chimney, I guess, is perhaps not visible, but I do think there are a bit of a few heavy-handed items here for a rather historic home that just need to be dialed back a little bit and made them a little more gentle. While I am certainly appreciative that someone is putting the love and effort into this house that I know it in part needs, but I think the entire approach needs to be just made a little more delicate and a little more sensitive across the board. Thank you.
All right, so I'll try to pull together a motion to float. It would be it would be, the staff recommendation starts out, deferral of the west porch pergola and main house front door for restudy. Conceptual approval for other alterations to the house. And conceptual approval for the garage and pool house. And how do I handle the bathhouse? I mean, do you guys want to give them another pass at trying to convince us, or just maybe deny the roof replacement, or what do you think? I don't know.
Julia, I'm wondering, I think Tori had mentioned the actual visibility of it, maybe actually going there and seeing it ourselves maybe could help, that we could do a site visit, defer it. I
mean, I know you can see the roof. I looked at it. The roof itself. I don't know about the stair.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If we could kind of maybe determine that, that would help me because it sounds like it's sort of maybe not, and that would help me a lot.
What if we defer it, and then I think we could all just go look, even if we don't have a group visit.
Okay, I just didn't know if you wanted to see it up close, go on the property, but
I'm open to that. Whatever you guys want to do.
Okay, I mean, I'm sorry. I would just ask Tori if that kind of meets the intent of her statement earlier. Is that fair?
I do think it meets the intent. I mean,
Okay.
you know, we, when I say we dissected it, we were kind of late and we were on Google and there's vegetation that kind of makes it hard to see. And so I apologize that we were not on site earlier to see that, but I do think that meets the intent. We'd be very comfortable with that.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, Julia, that was all I could ask.
Yeah. Still though, you want to keep the roof in flux or?
No, I'd defer anything to do with the bathhouse wholesale right now, pending the site visit for visibility and, you know, any other, just defer it wholesale. And we could have a qualification maybe that we have a scheduled site visit for the staff, or excuse me, the staff and board and public to attend.
Okay, so Lindsay, you can keep everything I said before and just add to it deferral of the bathhouse pending site visit by the board.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion by Julia on the floor for deferral of the West Porch pergola and main house front door for restudy, deferral of the bathhouse pending site visit by the board and staff, conceptual approval for other alterations to the house, and conceptual approval with staff comments for the garage and pool house. Did I capture that? Okay. Do we have a second?
I'm sorry, Madam Chairman, just one quick thing. Julia, concerning the garage, Lindsay, you just worded in the last sentence or two of that motion, said something about the garage. Did that?
You know what? I meant to also include some staff comments. I apologize.
I said conceptual approval with staff comments. Did you want to include all or just some?
No, it would just be, I think, 1 and 3. I think that might do it. 1 and 3.
Okay, and then Bill was asking about the garage and pool house. I'm going to read the motion back and then I'll see if this works. Okay. So deferral of the West Porch pergola and main house front door for restudy, deferral of the bathhouse pending a site visit by board and staff, conceptual approval for other alterations to the house, and conceptual approval with staff comments 1 and 3 for the garage and pool house. Does that work?
Well, staff comment 1 is about the main house, the door, and staff comment 3 is also about the main house. So.
Oh, okay. Hold on. So really just conceptual approval for the garage and pool house. And I think generally with staff, hold on. If those both apply to the main, then that just needs to go to the deferral.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to read it one more time, so we're going to get it right. Okay. Deferral of the West Porch pergola and main house front door for restudy with staff comments 1 and 3. Conceptual approval for, deferral of the bathhouse pending a site visit by board and staff. Conceptual approval for other alterations to the house, and conceptual approval for the garage and pool house.
Yes.
Okay.
And maybe I should also add conceptual approval of the proposed hardscaping, just so that's clear.
Okay, so added to the motion is conceptual approval of the hardscaping.
Yes.
Okay. All right, do I have a second to Julia's motion?
This is Bill, I'll second.
Thank you, Bill. Put it to a vote. Fillmore?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Bill?
Yeah, in favor.
The chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you.
Madam Chairman, I will be recusing myself for this application. If y'all can log me back in later, don't lose me.
All right. I don't know who's in charge of kicking Bill out, but please do so. All right, we are on agenda item number 5, 48 Smith Street.
All right, 48 Smith Street is requesting preliminary approval for the reconstruction and renovation of burned single-family house. This was previously a Category 3 in Harleston Village circa 1840s in the Old and Historic District. Some context, aerial photos, street view. Some Sanborn maps. And I'll turn it over to the applicant.
I'm sorry, did you say applicant? I was just clicking over.
Yes.
Okay, apologize. Thank you very much, Allison. Thank you all. Good evening. My name is Eddie Favor with the E-Favor Architects and representing Emily and David Scheibel and their family at the home that they're building at 48 Smith Street. Y'all have reviewed this before, and it was done in November. I believe we were the November 23rd meeting, and it received conceptual approval. So I'll run through. There were essentially 2 comments directed at the west elevation recess and the south elevation that will highlight that we feel like we've addressed. The other thing, just for correction for the record, I know it was posted as preliminary, but we submitted as final. And feel like we had enough to do that. So it looks like it was advertised as preliminary, but it was submittal on our application as final approval. So we'll request that this evening if that's possible. And think we have enough to support that. Next slide, please. So just quickly run through some of the history, which everybody's very familiar with. As I was waiting for this evening's for us to come up, I actually looked into our folder and found a letter that I received from Emily, the owner, literally a year ago today, expressing her wishes and what she was thinking about this property, and just I think fortuitous that it's happening today and hopefully for final approval. But historically, the property was an extremely large lot, and as you can see from the Sanborn maps, several different iterations of things that were added onto it from 1888 when it was first kind of configured to 1951 to the present state. Next slide, please. And it had a series of apartments in it throughout, and outbuildings that were built on there that were not original. Next slide, please. Was the unfortunate situation of a devastating fire and lack of any type of attention to that structure after it happened, which brought us to the state that it is in presently, or post the previous owner to the current that took it on to move forward with a new construction. Next slide, please. So the site is located just to the north of Smith Street and abuts the application you just saw prior. So welcome to the new neighbors, and it's so nice that both of these very significant properties are being developed and in the manners that they are. Next slide, please. Streetscape, again, from our previous submission, with the 48 Smith being the far right, with scaffolding at the front facade presently. Next slide. Just again, more in the way of immediate neighborhood context and neighborhood block. So there are several structures, similar scale and height and architectural character, which is what was approved last time. Excuse me. Next slide, please. So the footprint of the current structure and what we will be starting with was reviewed last time is the masonry walls on the main house that remain from foundation down, but the existing kitchen house and existing carriage house. Next slide, please. So as it stands presently, the facade that is up there is coming down, and it was something that was deemed so by inspections and the structural engineer, because the fire actually traveled within the wall frame in itself. But all of that, as you will see, it's our goal to reference and salvage and use as much of that as we can, and using it as reference for what we do when we put back. But in no way, shape, or form, as we stated prior, that this is intended to be a reproduction, but feel like it's much more respectful of the neighborhood, and the house itself is something that references it, what was there prior. Next slide. Again, this just to show the rear carriage houses. Again, minimal visibility. Several of the openings had to be reworked. It was approved at the last application as presented in the proposed, and that will follow. Next slide, please. Similarly, just again to refresh everybody's memory of what or what is there presently, and then per our proposed, what it would go back and as approved last time. Next slide, please. That's the rear and sides elevation, again, not visible, but asbestos shingle siding and a CMU shed back off the back, but all of that would be replaced. Next slide, please. So just in summary of the conceptual BAR comments, and I don't need to necessarily go through 1 and 2, although it was, lamenting the loss of what was there, which had nothing to do with our owners, and thanking them in a sense for kind of willing to take this on, because it wasn't insignificant, needless to say. It's been a year doing what they've done to get to this point. But the ones that did apply were that the foundation that exists should be preserved in situ and bolstered and rebuilt where necessary, which is happening. The fenestration of the building should be appropriate and cohesive. The ribbon window, which was in the west elevation, and the large floor-to-ceiling windows that were minimally visible, in our opinion, if at all, from Smith Street, needed to be restudied. We didn't necessarily think they were inappropriate, but certainly took the board's comments and can show you what we've done with that. Next, please. Sheila Werdemer is landscape architect on this project as well, so I'll move this quickly, but that's the existing kind of conditions of the site, with the exception of the main house, which obviously is not there. Next, please. And I can go to the next one as well. So there's a 1-level garage, again, approved conceptually last time, which is at the bottom of the drawing there. A screening wall that divides the property so that the more formal part and parking court is in the front, and just open space to the rear. Next slide, please. And these are Werdemer's details related to the hardscape and paving that will be happening. Again, not a lot of it visible from public right of way, but all of it's in here for your review. Next slide, please. Similar, next slide, please. This is the wall that sits back past the parking court that divides the kind of semi-private from private area of the yard. Just a solid masonry wall. Next slide, please. And the gates that are proposed for the drive, pedestrian, and there's another one at the recessed west side elevation. Next slide, please. Which is that one. Next slide, please. So this is just for y'all's reference, again, previous submission of where we were with site plan. Next slide, please. And current submission, which again simplified some of the landscape elements and bolstered kind of the landscape in front of the hyphen that's recessed to the back there, that's immediately at the end of the path from the garage's side door. Next slide, please. Previous submission and the areas that we were asked to restudy, again, better illustrated in elevation, but in plan, you can see the recess section of the Smith Street elevation where the elevator sits in the proposed garden plan. We had a ribbon window where it abutted the main house, and the proposed has adjusted that. Similarly, in the breakfast room, hyphen from the main house to the kitchen houses, have kind of strengthened that detail related to the fenestration there. Previously, it was very, very minimal, kind of lightweight, almost a kind of a Hope steel window type system or a direct set system. And we've gone with more traditional wood windows in that area. Next slide, please. Similarly, that's illustrated here in plan. Next slide, please. And again, next slide. So current proposed, you can see the hyphen addressed in plan. Next slide, please. So previous submission, again, this is the full expanded, full elevation. We have blown ups of that, but the west elevation, you'll see the ribbon window up top, and then the very kind of lightweight elements of the hyphen in the south elevation. Next slide, please. And then the current proposed, again, a very traditional type of detailing of the window at the Smith Street elevation with a recessed entry, two very simple windows with an entry door below, and the hyphen again beefed up a little bit with a little bit heavier detailing around it and the window systems as well. Next slide, please. So this is the only thing that did not get updated in here, and I apologize, this was from Ms. Mortimer's office, is the element from the garage to the hyphen where it looks like that walkway continues. You'll note in the previous drawings, which I think it was A201, there's planting there because there's not actually a door there. Not that that really matters because it's not visible, but just for your clarification. And the window system in detailing and spirit is something like what you see above in the top right, rather than the minimal one we had proposed prior. Next slide, please.
And you got about a minute left.
Okay. So enlarged elevation shows prior where the ribbon window is. Next slide. And the current solution. Next slide, please. Prior with the minimal windows at the hyphen, which again is extremely minimally visible, but think it warrants that type of treatment, at least glass there. Next slide. Have strengthened that with the way that's detailed. Next slide, please. And then I can probably kind of go through these at a second at a time and you can just roll, but they're section details and things that may be more than you need to get into, but feel free to just flow through those, Frankie. If there's something I see that needs to be addressed or anybody would like to stop me or detail that in questions, happy to do so. That's the garage element, again, that's far removed, but that's in there. Current proposed, nothing changed on that. Next slide. A character that we're looking at that with the infamous fig ivy, just trying to cover it up. Next slide. Building sections. And next. The hyphen element, sorry, I'll go back to that just very briefly, because it's an anomaly the way that house had that kind of piazza stair from the front, and not very common, but it's something that we wanted to maintain and put back here to kind of reference the spirit of it. Next slide. More in the way of building sections. Next slide. And then wall sections here related to both that west side wall that recesses from the street. And the next slide. The hyphen element there as well. Typical piazza details. Next slide. And our proposed end product. So happy to answer any questions. I do thank, as always, Preservation Society Historic Charleston for their comments and direction and time in looking at this, and staff as well. So thank you.
Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
I'm trying to figure out, just to make sure that I have it straight in my head, but Eddie, can you just state that this front house is new construction, right? It's not a renovation or a restoration at this point. It's new construction, right? From building code point of view and
that's correct.
Everything. Okay,
that's
cool.
correct. And the only thing that was a little, I don't know the right word to use, is because we wanted to keep the foundation, even though I think engineer and everybody was a little concerned about it, but there's a way to make that work. So we're using that as a basis. But yes, Julia, we're kind of being guided by new construction rules for the front house.
Gotcha. Therefore, the insulated windows and
yes, ma'am.
Okay, gotcha. All right.
Yes,
thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, do we have anyone speaking from the public?
Yes, first we have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the application for preliminary approval for the reconstruction and renovation of 48 Smith Street. We have been concerned about this property for several years, and we are very pleased to see a plan to return this property to a single-family house. We believe it would be helpful for the applicant to inventory salvageable elements and document where they will be used, so there will be a record for the future. We are particularly concerned about the front door surround and remaining cornice ornament. We hope that these details will be salvaged and reused as much as possible, or replicated exactly if they cannot be reused. We recommend approval of this application, and we respectfully request that this project is expedited through the permitting process to prevent any delays which might cause further deterioration or instability. Thank you.
Thank you, April. Frankie, do we have anyone else speaking from the public?
Yes, we also have Erin Minnigan.
Thank you. Erin Minnigan with Preservation Society of Charleston. To reiterate our previous comments, the Preservation Society is incredibly supportive of the effort to reconstruct this notable historic building in a timely manner, and thrilled to see a proposal to return the house to its historic use as a single-family residence. Planning for the future of the site has been an ongoing challenge for several years, and we urge swift action to advance the project and prevent further deterioration. We are supportive of reconstructing the building in the character of the previously existing house and encourage the form, materials, and detailing to be as consistent as possible. Since this is a reconstruction, we do feel the large vertical windows proposed toward the rear of the south elevation are incompatible and should be replaced with more traditional fenestration. Also, we do find it regrettable that falsified carriage doors are being created on the newer portions of the dependency, but understand this was found acceptable at the last hearing. We again state our strong support for this project and are hopeful it will move forward with consideration of our comments regarding fenestration. Thank you.
Thank you, Erin.
That's all we have speaking for the public.
Thank you, Frankie. All right, Allison, if you'll give us city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Am I able to rebut, or is that after?
After the staff.
Excuse me. Sorry. Thank you.
Here we have the previous staff comments from the last meeting, which received conceptual approval with staff comments 1, 2, 3, 5, and 6. And our current staff comments are, while the ribbon windows proposed for the west elevation have been eliminated, the ribbon windows on the south facade, or the hyphen, which will be visible from Wentworth and from further south on Smith, have not been omitted and have been enlarged, reducing the space between the windows. Previous staff comments noted that this is an appropriate window type. Staff feels that there is a large disparity between the scale of the large plan floor-to-ceiling windows and the adjacent historic windows. The proposed windows are Marvin double-hung insulated window. BAR typically prefers single-pane true divided light for historic structures. 3, although this is unusual to mix the materials of a gate and fence, the proposed wood gate on iron fence is harmonious with the side of the street. BAR policy generally does not allow exposed fasteners on fences, so the strap hinges either should be moved to the interior of the property or hidden. And staff recommendation is preliminary approval with staff comments. We had advertised this as preliminary because it only received conceptual approval previously, so we can leave that to the board to decide.
Okay, now, Eddie, you have the opportunity to respond to or clarify anything raised in the public comment.
Thank you. And appreciate comments of Preservation Society and Historic Charleston. But do feel like that the windows at the hyphen are appropriate. And as I said, it's a little bit of a different animal because this isn't a reproduction or a reconstruction. But even with that said, it's not uncommon that the hyphen element is something that is lighter or illustrates or better documents the separation between the buildings to the back. And per the drawings and the sheet that you see, I guess it's A201, it's an extremely long structure when everything is together. And to break that up with something in the way of glass, as we've done, I think is extremely appropriate. I'd say it's probably pretty tough to see from Wentworth Street. I may be wrong, but I've stood there and tried to look myself and try to imagine it there, but I don't know that that's the case. But even so, I don't think it's unattractive. And I think it's a proper solution architecturally. I also want to mention, I appreciate the comment related to preliminary, but was of the understanding like we applied for a certain level, that's what it would be if it met the requirements, and I think it did. So again, respectfully, would like to go to final with the detail that we had provided, and hope that y'all find that to be the case. It's been a year since we've been working on it, and think it's ready to go there, and everybody very supportive of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie. All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and a vote at this time.
All right, I apologize, but I need to ask the applicant one more thing. Since it is new construction, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand things properly, but since it's new construction, I think I wondered this previously, but I believe it is required to have its first floor 2 feet above DFE, which I think would be 12.
Right.
Which is a little bit higher than what you have. So did you look into that? Am I wrong?
Yes, no, what we had discussed, and again, I assure you, no smoke and mirrors, it's extremely kind of complicated, but as it was attached to the existing structures to the rear, what was discussed was the fact that the 1 foot was sufficient, and that met code, and the city's interpretation of that. And if we need clarification of it, I could certainly get it to you. But that's where that started. So the whole idea of it being, and trying not to get it any taller. So that's where that landed.
Okay, so building inspections has looked at that and they're cool with it.
Yes, ma'am. And I can
awesome.
reiterate and get something in writing. Like I said, Julia, in all honesty, it was conversations many times when we were on site about how to deal with that, knowing we were dealing with the foundation and the building height and all of that. But I can make sure that that's kind of confirmed in writing for you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you for asking.
Beyond that, I mean, I think I'm pretty comfortable with it now. And I don't really have a major issue with the hyphen windows. But I'm curious what other board members think and how they feel.
No more here. I would like to see I'm not crazy about the hyphen windows personally, but I mean, the bottom line is this is a new construction. And so it's just like the windows, there are constraints because it is a new construction and not a restoration of an existing historic building, that there are constraints with the materials that can be used by code. And it is certainly not uncommon to see new constructions, even ones that lean pretty heavily towards traditional design, with hyphens with a lot of glass in them. So designed that way from the get-go. And so I would rather see it toned down, but I think if the rest of my board members are okay with it, I would probably come on board.
Anybody else?
I don't have anything to add necessarily.
Okay. So what about well, Yeah, go ahead, Lindsay.
I was just asking, I know that staff had recommended preliminary approval, and is there enough submitted? Is there enough here to give final approval?
I think so.
It was a threshold question for me that, you know, if you were going to make that motion, whether there was enough there, but okay.
I think so. Tori, do you agree?
I was hoping you'd ask me. Didn't want to interject once more. We believe that there's enough information in the packet to get final approval. And I will say that, and this is something for us to think about in the future, that we noted it as what the next step in the review process was. And we probably missed his checkbox, sorry, Eddie, on the application. But normally we would advertise it as the next level of review, and we would say in the meeting a recommendation for, if we felt like it could go to final, we would recommend it for final, but we missed that, and we do think it's appropriate for final review.
Thank you.
So Julia Mass, does that change? I mean, there's a lot in these drawings. I mean, I think they have clearly put a lot of time and effort into this. It is not a halfway set limping along. So I'm comfortable to try to keep them on their path if we collectively can get there.
I think it's there personally. And in terms of staff comments, again, if you guys are kind of okay with the hyphen windows, I don't have a problem with them, and I appreciate Eddie's defense of that design decision. I guess comment number 3 we could adopt, and then again, the Marvin window or insulated windows are required because it's a new structure, so there's no getting around that.
I think the selection of the window is going to be important, but they're going to have to meet the standards. And so,
so I'll just float a motion for final approval with staff comment number 3.
All right, we have a motion on the floor for final approval with staff comment 3. Do I have a second?
Second.
Glenn? We'll put the motion to a vote. Fillmore?
yay in favor.
Julia?
Yay in favor.
Glenn?
Yay in favor.
Chair votes the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you all very much. Have a good night.
All right, let's bring Bill back in. Welcome back, Bill. We are on our 6th and final agenda item this evening, 114 Cannon Street and 219 Ashley Avenue. Allison, if you'll give us an introduction and overview, please.
Sure. 114 Cannon and 219 Ashley are requesting conceptual approval for minor alterations to an existing structure and the construction of 2 new dwellings. This is a category 4 in Cannon Borough, Elliott Borough, and Old City District. Here's some context in the corner there. This is the historic structure that's there. Showing the context of the area. Sanborn maps from 1902 and 1955 showing that corner store building. And now I will turn it over to the applicant for the presentation.
Hello, this is Andrew Gould, New World Byzantine. So this is a project you haven't seen before that involves multiple buildings. So I'll do my best to explain everything efficiently and get you oriented. This is a large lot that includes this corner building, which currently has the Low Country Barber Shop in it, It's got a derelict little commercial building attached to it, and it's got a space behind it that's currently a parking lot. So this has been bought by a new owner, Tift Mitchell, who was also the client for the development just down the street that I worked on, 131 Cannon Street, the Wren's Nest compound. And we're trying to do a similar short-term rental compound here. So the apartment upstairs will stay an apartment. The commercial space downstairs, we're anticipating turning into a restaurant and expanding into the adjoining derelict commercial building. The barber shop is moving out to another building in the neighborhood. And of course, there's a financial temptation to convert the whole building into short-term rentals. But the neighborhood association really did not want to see that happen. They really wanted to conserve this historic commercial space as a commercial use. So in order to do that, we're going to build 2 new dwellings in the parking lot in the back in order to make up for the additional 2 residential units that zoning allows on this property. And the neighborhood association has been very supportive of that development plan, and was very supportive at the Board of Zoning Appeals to get the necessary parking variances in order to be able to develop the property in that way. We're not planning to make any significant changes to this existing wooden structure. It's in good shape as it is. If you can go on to the next slide. It has this little yellow structure attached to the left. Go on to the next slide. There has been a structure sort of like this on the Sanborn maps for a long time. I haven't been able to determine how old this existing structure is. We've researched exhaustively and haven't been able to find any old photographs of this structure. But the brick is pretty old looking, and staff said they think it's old enough that they'd prefer to conserve this brick facade as opposed to replace it with a new facade. So our plan is to repair the brick and piece back together what's left of the woodwork, replace the doors with more appropriate ones. Go on to the next slide. Here you can see the 2 sides of the structure. The right side has corrugated metal siding, which I'm proposing to replace with tongue and groove wood siding. And then the other view there is looking through the gap between this building and the adjoining house. And you can see the left wall of this yellow building is missing entirely. Move on to the next slide. And then this is the back of the structure. Next one. And the back of that yellow building. Unfortunately, we're going to have to demolish this and replace it. It's almost a work of art as it is. But we're planning to extend the back of this building back about 10 feet to align with the column line there. Move on to the next slide. And this is the inside of that existing structure, which is completely collapsed. Next one. Here you can get a better idea here where we're going to extend the back of that 1-story structure till it lines up with that column on the blue building. Next slide. So I want to walk you through a bit of the context in relation to where we're going to build the 2 new houses. You can see here the parking lot between that sort of chapel building, which I think is built in the 1980s as a wedding chapel. Move on to the next slide. And here's this parking lot where the 2 new houses will go. Next one. Another view of that. Next one. And you can see a pretty good picture of that. Yeah, and looking north up Ashley at that parking lot. All right, so pause here. So I want to talk about the surrounding buildings now, because it's a rather interesting site. Of course, one is often tempted to say that any empty lot ought to have a typical single house on it, but that's really not the pattern that we see in this particular vicinity. If you look directly across the street from our empty lot, you can see there's the parish building of the Holy Communion Church, which is quite a monumental sort of Second Empire style building. It's really, really tall. You can see it's got triple hung windows on both the first and second floors. It's probably a 50-foot tall building. Go on to the next slide. And then here we are on the south side of Cannon Street. You can see there's the really tall house that's wrapping up its renovation right now on that corner, a 3-story building. And then next slide. And next door to that, you can see there's a house with a front porch. And go on to the next slide. And on the other side of the street, again, we've got a fairly monumental house with a front porch. And it's kind of like this all up and down these 2 blocks. There's really not any rhythm of, typical rhythm of single houses on this stretch of Ashley Avenue. So we think it's appropriate to build our new house with the long side to the street, as many of these buildings have. Go on to the next slide. The Sanborn maps show a pretty interesting property history. You can see that the lot was originally sort of a combination of a Cannon Street lot and a Ashley Avenue lot. And that's why that lot is L-shaped. And it has 2 addresses. It's got 114 on the Cannon Street side, and it's got 219 on the Ashley Street side. So I think it's pretty clear that these lots were platted as 2 separate lots. There was supposed to be a house facing Ashley and then the corner building facing Cannon. But the grocery store operator who bought these lots in the 1880s and built that grocery store on the corner wanted more space, and he bought both lots. And you can see there were various 1-story outbuildings, a wagon house back there. And then on the 1944 map, you can see that small commercial building that's now painted yellow, something like that was on the lot in 1944. It was a feed store. That was actually a pretty prominent animal feed store through much of the 20th century. And again, the whole lot was just sort of 1-story shed buildings for this commercial operation. I think it's important to recognize that the parking lot, was not really ever meant to be the backyard of a grand house. This was a commercial property that happened to absorb a second lot, but that second lot really can be treated as an Ashley Avenue lot, independent of the corner building. Next slide. So here's the site plan. The lot has reduced in size since the Sanborn maps. It's now more or less a rectangular lot. And you can see the footprints of the new houses that I'm proposing. They're pretty small footprints, quite small compared to the corner building. And you can see I'm proposing the long side of the building to the street with a porch on the narrow end. And then a small house with a cantilevered porch behind that. And go on to the next slide. So here's the existing and proposed streetscape. I've tried to design a really, really beautiful, elegant house that'll be a real asset to the street and a real complement to that Second Empire style parish building directly across from it. I've kept my building just a touch shorter than the existing corner building. But again, I'm not trying to make this look like it's a dependency that's associated with the corner building. I'm trying to make it look like it's its own house with its own Ashley Avenue address. Next slide.
Mr. Gould, you've got about 2 minutes left.
Okay, I might need a little more time since I'm talking about 4 buildings here, if possible, but I'll try to move quickly. So you can see existing and proposed views of the buildings as an ensemble. Go on to the next slide. This just shows existing and proposed views of the corner building. You can see we're just making some little repairs and door replacements where necessary. And I'm replacing that little broken down frontage wall with a nicer brick frontage wall. That's about it on the existing structure. Go on. Yeah, and similarly on the back, just repairing that existing structure and extending it a little bit. And here we have the main facade facing Ashley of the new house. You know, I really want to do something elegant here because, you know, as you could see from the context images, all of the surrounding buildings around this intersection are unusually grand and beautiful buildings. You know, really finely detailed structures with quite special details that you don't see on ordinary houses in the neighborhood. And, you know, I think this being an opportunity to build a new house right up on Ashley Avenue surrounded in that context, we should do something a bit more special than usual here. And I've tried to give this house an unusually beautiful trim package with these gable brackets and window hoods and scrolled window trim. Move on to the next slide. You can see the side of that with its beautiful porch. Go on to the next slide. Floor plans. It's a typical 4-bedroom house. Go on to the next slide. Building section. Next slide. And here is the second new house, which is even smaller. It's got a elegant cantilevered wooden porch and exposed rafter tails to contrast a bit from the other house. Go on to the next one and next one. So this is a 3-bedroom house. Go on to the next slide. It's building section. Next one. Details. It's my usual, you know, wood windows, beaded wood trim, all good stuff. Next one. I wanted to show just a few precedent images for buildings that have this particular form, because the last time I did a building like this, there was a big discussion at the board about whether this ever actually happens, that you put the piazza door and the porch on the gable side of a house and have the long side of the house facing the street. And of course, it's not the usual form for a single house, but it does happen rather a lot. This is just 2 blocks up Ashley Avenue on the same side of the street. You can see there's a historic house that has exactly that configuration. Next one. You know, here's another one on Morrison Smith that's like that. Next one. Further down Cannon Street, this building has a piazza door on the gable side. Next one. This little house on Duncan Street has that. Next one. This little one on the College of Charleston campus has it, quite an old house with that configuration. And this is a house I designed on the corner of Line and the Crosstown that the board approved with that configuration. And go on to the next one. This is a precedent a few blocks down the street on Smith for that scrolled window trim, which I find very beautiful. Next one. And just a couple of precedents a few doors down on Cannon Street for these gabled window hoods on brackets. They're really common in that vicinity. Next one. And a precedent just in the neighborhood for these large gable brackets that drop down across the frieze board into the architrave board. I find it quite an elegant way to do gable brackets, and you see that all through the neighborhood. I think that's my last slide. Thank you.
All right. Do my fellow board members have any questions for the applicant?
Site plan wise, I have a question about garbage, recycling, mechanical units, bicycles, things like that.
You want to scroll all the way back to the site plan there? Sure. So there's some space around and in between the houses, which will be adequate for air conditioning units. I'm imagining the trash cans for the houses are going to go in that alley between the 2 houses. I am not sure what that restaurant's going to want to do with their side of the property. I have one more parking space shown here than is required. We're only required 4.5, and I'm showing 6. So I think, you know, probably a couple of those parking spaces are going to go to the restaurant. They may choose to give up one of them to have a dumpster or trash cans back there. But I'm not designing the restaurant. There's a commercial restaurant architect who's going to be handling that. So my scope of work is pretty much limited to, you know, the architectural changes to that building and the new buildings.
Any other board questions at this time?
Andrew, if you can just maybe talk about the decorative iron railings. I know you provided precedence for almost all of your details. And I know you've done the iron railings before, but if you can just like talk about where that comes from, since this is a more prominent location.
Well, sure. As I think you know, I did that particular detail at the 131 Cannon development, where we have a wooden top rail, and then the balusters and the bottom rail are made of iron. I wish I had put a picture in there of that, but it's a detail that I've seen in New Orleans. You know, not on the sort of French Quarter buildings where the porches are made entirely of iron, but in the more Victorian parts of New Orleans where the houses are made of wood. Quite a lot of them have that type of railing where the top rail is wood, like you'd see on a Charleston porch, but then the lower parts of it are made of metal, and it looks really good because the wooden top rail helps it integrate in with the wooden columns. But then you get the beautiful cast iron details, and of course, you know, the longevity of that. I feel rather strongly that it's important to try to make porch details that are going to last. I myself have designed wooden balustrades that after just 5 or 10 years are falling apart. And you know, that even becomes a safety hazard. So I really like using iron in the balustrade for that reason. It'll last, it's strong, it's safe, it's beautiful, and people have reacted really well to it on those 131 Cannon buildings that I did.
Any other board questions at this time? All right, we'll move on to public comment. Frankie, I see one letter, but before I read that, do we have anyone speaking?
Yes, we have April Wood.
April Wood, Historic Charleston Foundation. HCF has reviewed the request for conceptual approval for minor alterations to the existing structure and the construction of 2 new dwellings at 114 Cannon Street. We are pleased that this much needed rehabilitation project at the historic structure will be taken on. We have no objection to the general architectural direction of the project. We believe that the height of the new structure, the taller of the new structures, should be reduced to be visibly differential to the historic structure, especially because this is a highly visible corner location. We recommend deferral so the height of the new construction can be reduced. Thank you.
April. And Frankie, is that all for anyone speaking from the public?
Yeah, that is all we have signed up to speak.
Okay. I have a letter from the Cannonboro Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association dated January 26, 2022. Dear Tori, the project at 114 Cannon Street is appropriate in height, scale, and mass for Cannon Street. The design and details of the 2 structures complement the front building as well as the surrounding properties. This project will fill a gap on the Ashley Street side as well as enhance the historical fabric of the block and neighborhood. We recommend approval to the board. Sincerely, Marianne Hawkins, President of the Cannonboro Elliott Borough Neighborhood Association. All right, Allison, if you'll give city staff comments and recommendations, please.
Sure. Staff comments. Overall, this project has only gone through sketch plan review with TRC. It has not gone through TRC pre-app, so the design is subject to change. Number 2, the juxtaposition of multiple railing styles is not harmonious. Styles that are more complementary to one another would be preferred. Number 3, both new dwellings should be subordinate to the historic structure. They appear to be the same height. It is critical at this juncture to determine if subordination is needed or if these two buildings are to be viewed as an infill project within their own right. For Unit B, the windows are very horizontal and are proportionally large, especially compared to the historic structure. The hoods, while making the large openings seem less industrial, make the window feel even larger. Staff recommends that the hoods remain, but the size of the windows are reduced. Relating to comment number 3, if the board is to determine that this building needs to be subordinate to the historic structure, then the hipped roof should be adjusted to accomplish subordination. Number 6, the dormer on the south facade feels too large on the narrow facade and should be reduced in width, consistent with comment number 4. Number 7, the cast iron rail is overly decorative and very high style. This unit is replicating the style of a Charleston single house, which typically do not feature iron railings on the second story. This type of intricate railing is historically a Victorian era addition, such as the Juliet balconies you see along Rainbow Row, and are more appropriate in the French Quarter. Number 8, the combination of wood and iron railing on the piazza is not appropriate. When cast iron is used as a railing, it is typically both the column and balustrade. Number 9, the piazza doors have very large solid windows and should be more sympathetic to the doors of the historic structure or include some sort of muntin pattern. And for Unit C, detailing on the balcony bracket isn't appropriate for a downtown. A curve or more decorative element would be more suitable. Number 11, the balustrade pattern is more suburban in nature. Straight pickets or turned balusters would be more appropriate. The pattern shown is very typical of Low Country, but not typical in downtown Charleston. 12, while we understand the balcony element for the parking constraints, the balcony appears to be mimicking a piazza without the first level, which is atypical for Charleston. Balconies are typically much shallower, less predominant features. And 13, there seems to be a combination of multiple stylistic elements such as rafter tails and balcony brackets. Because of the style of the detailing, such as rafter tails and brackets, the classical style of the window grid may need to be restudied or reduced to 2/2. And for the brick wall, wall piercings are not typical for the area, and staff recommends a solid wall. The staff recommendation is to defer for restudy with staff comments.
Thank you, Allison. Mr. Gould, would you like to respond to anything raised in the public comment or in the city staff comments and recommendations?
Oh, yeah, boy, there's a lot there. Let me talk first about subordination. You know, when this project first came to me, I knew that that was going to be the main question. And so I asked both Tori and Kim to come meet with me on the site before I designed anything to look at it. And I made the case that the 219 Ashley lot reads as its own lot. It should have its own house on it addressing the street. It'll have its own front door facing the street. It is in no way a sort of dependency structure, you know, entered via the driveway of the existing building. Furthermore, the existing building was built as a grocery store. It was not built as a, you know, as a mansion that would have a dependency dwelling behind it. So for these reasons, you know, I understood that Tori and Kim agreed with me that this is not a situation where we need to be designing this to look like a subordinate dependency. They said it should address the street in the way that other houses on the street address the street. You know, that they said they would prefer it not be taller than the existing building. You know, but that it's okay for it to be a 2.5-story structure like the existing building. And so I designed it accordingly with that guidance. You know, I'll also point out that all of the surrounding buildings on other lots, many of them are enormous. Many of them are 3.5 stories, 50-foot tall structures, dramatically bigger than this. So I'm already kind of on the modest side in the context of the surrounding buildings. Moving on to all these other staff comments. In terms of the windows, I used 8/8 windows, which are about 38 inches wide, because proportionately it looked best on this wide facade. If I used narrower windows, I think there'd be too high a wall to window ratio. I'm quite fond of 8/8 windows. I've used them on several buildings, and this board has approved them on different buildings before because they match it proportionately. And with that and with many other things on this list, I want to emphasize I am not trying to copy a typical Charleston house of any specific historical vintage. If I wanted to make this look exactly like a 1900 single house, I easily could have done that. But why would we want to do that? Why would new houses have to exactly copy the old buildings in the neighborhood? This board routinely approves modernistic new houses that are clearly of their time. I happen to work in a traditional vocabulary, but I think it's appropriate for me to be able to pull windows and railing details and so forth from historical buildings of many different periods and geographical regions. And if I can make something that looks like a well-ordered, beautiful composition, I think the mere fact that an 8/8 window is less common in Charleston than it is in other cities, is immaterial, because I could be proposing a modernistic building with wildly modernistic windows, and you'd take that on its own terms, and not say that it has to look just like any other Charleston 1900 house. I would say the same thing about the railings. Yes, if you're looking at old buildings, cast iron railings are uncommon in Charleston and typically seen on early 19th century buildings in the French Quarter. But I'm not building a historic building here. I'm building a new building in my own style. I'm pulling together details that I've seen all over the world that I think are good design decisions and make a beautiful building. And I think it's a good thing that my house doesn't look exactly like 1900 houses in the neighborhood, because after all, don't we want new buildings to be distinct from the historic buildings in the area? And I think it's quite appropriate to make new traditional buildings distinct by using traditional details that are a little untypical of the context. That we don't, of course, again, you guys approve all sorts of modernistic houses with iron railings, and nobody ever says the iron railing, belongs in the French Quarter if it's a modernistic house. So again, let's be open-minded and say that, this is a new building. It's in my own style, and, we can judge iron railings on their own merits. As for the X railing on the second house, I'm a little puzzled by the comments about that, because it's exactly the same railing design that I used at my 221 St. Philip project, which was enthusiastically endorsed by the large BAR. That railing's already been built. Everyone's reacting very well to it. At that time, I showed a whole bunch of pictures of houses in the neighborhood that have X railings in them, and everyone agreed that that's a local neighborhood detail and quite appropriate. And I guess I would say the same about the brick frontage wall with the piercing in it. I nearly copied that wall from an old brick frontage wall that faces the Mitchell School playground, just north of the crosstown. And actually brick walls with piercings in them are just all over the neighborhood. So I don't really see what would be the issue of that. I'd just like to push back against the sort of temptation of the board whenever you see a traditional project to say simplify, no high style. Why? This is a new house. It's right up on a grand street. It's surrounded by grand and ornate buildings. Let's try to do something fine here and not something that's simple and boring like most new construction. Thank you.
All right, I'll open it up for board discussion and vote at this time.
Lindsay, if you don't mind, I would like to address Mr. Gold. He's absolutely right that Kim and I did come on site, and the comment that that we have here about subordination versus separation is a little bit, it does sound like it leans one way or the other. And we, Kim and I came on site and we looked at the project with Tiff and Andrew, and this is an empty lot, and we did give the direction that it felt like it could be its own lot and that it could stand within its own, and it could be an infill project. And so what the gist of the comment really should be is that we would like for the board, we prefer that the board feel the same way, but the board needs to make that determination as it will affect other, other comments that you might have. So sorry for the confusion.
Thank you, Tori. All right, we are now in board discussion. Well, I can start off. Just my only comment that I had really was I agree that that does read as its own lot, and I agree that unit B doesn't need to be subordinate to the house on the corner. That would comment.
This is Bill. I'll go ahead. There's a lot here, and I do see merit in several of staff's comments. I understand, where the applicant's coming from on a lot of these. I think these finer points we're probably going to need to address one by one, and at least be willing to weigh in on my opinions about those if we want to go back to the beginning, because I think that's what we're going to get down to here, having to address these finer points, unless somebody has a more wholesale opinion about the design. So I'd be willing to go there if possible. We could go back to the beginning of the staff comments. I'll try to weigh in at least my portion of that. Because I believe they are very thorough for one. I appreciate going through that. Obviously, comment number one overall is important as we're subject to some change to TRC. So I do agree with the comment number two. I think, Lindsay, I'm more in camp with your suggestion about the second lot being able to sustain its own presence rather than subordination to the historic corner building. Okay, next. Yeah, I think there is some merit in that comment, definitely. Comment 4, yes. Or determined support. I think we talked about that, so I don't think that's applicable. I agree with the comment about the dormer. I do agree with the comment about the cast iron railing. And again, comment 8 akin to that. A little on the fence about comment 9. To some degree subjective. Number 10, I don't know if it has to be that, but I guess I'm indifferent to that comment. And then the balustrade pattern of suburban. I agree with that. Comment 11 on unit C. Yeah, I actually have seen, they're really rare, but I have seen cantilevered second floor, even historic porches before. It's really rare, but it does happen. So it is atypical, but that is correct. But I guess I could see it potentially working here. I agree with comment 13. and then comment number 1 about the wall. So that's where I am as far as a synopsis of what we went through here.
So Bill, is that all of your?
Yeah, I went through all the comments because I think the comments were a very good, concise list of really a summary of issues. Yeah.
Okay. I'll keep my part as simple as possible because I'm not going to go through that laundry list. I will say that I would break with staff regarding the wall. I think there is so much going on here that in this particular case, I think having potentially a pierced wall would help to open this up. I know, that there's definitely philosophy as to solid versus pierced brick or pierced opening garden walls. And I think we're not trying to necessarily communicate a date here. So I frankly welcome the openness because I will be perfectly honest with you. I feel like, well, first of all, I admire the applicant's detail. I admire the attention to detail. I admire the attempt to have something worth looking at and appreciating. That said, I feel like this, as with other projects, it is attempting to fit 80 pounds into a 10-pound bag. There's nowhere for bicycles, there's nowhere for garbage, nowhere for recycling, nowhere for a grease trap, a roller garbage can for a restaurant, recycling, wine bottles. And I know that we are not TRC, but the site plan has to work. And so you're asking for architectural approval on footprints and plans and details when we don't know that the site plan actually can function. And that's what I think frustrates me here. I think that it is just asking for more, when in reality, dialing this back a little bit and allowing it to work and breathe would make for such a better project, regardless of the applicant's financial need probably for another bedroom to make the dollars work. But I mean, can I have one tree, like one blade of grass, one shrub? There's nothing on the site plan because it doesn't fit. And so because of that, I reject the site plan for restudy to understand how to actually develop a vacant lot, which I don't have any issue with addressing Ashley Avenue. Thank you.
That's a very valid point, I think, Glenn. So, Bill, would you be willing to fashion a motion with your laundry list and maybe adding Glenn's, I don't know, somehow addressing Glenn's concern? I don't know if Glenn's is like a non-starter.
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering, Julia.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm wondering if, Glenn, is that what you were basically saying? Is that?
I mean, architecturally, I don't have a problem with a lot of the things about the buildings. It's simply, it's the cart before the horse. And I don't know how many cars zoning requires to be here, but, you're talking about a commercial restaurant architect also coming involved, but I question whether we're at the right stage to be talking about the detail here. And I don't dislike the buildings. I want to be very clear about that. I mean, sure, there's detailing to talk about, but to me, the request of the intensification of the site is not thoughtful. It really is short-sighted and selfish, to be honest with you.
Enough to warrant really deferral of the project pending would it be a TRC approval or some level of TRC review and approval? Because you're making some really good points, Glenn. I mean, there could suddenly be, can washes and recycling and then trash and then winter deliveries coming. And, there's a lot of things, coolers, there's a lot of things happening that could be happening rather, that could definitely affect the context of what we're seeing here.
I don't know where you hang those smelly mats that they wash out at the end of every night. I mean, it's just stuff like that that's reality that may or may not even involve TRC, but it I think it just is part of it. I mean, since the applicant has his hand raised, I'm glad to ask him where they're going to put the the smelly mats and all that stuff?
Sure, yeah, I'd like to respond to this. Well, first of all, we negotiated this development plan with Lee Batchelder, the zoning administrator, who endorsed this number of parking spaces, in large part because we're directly across the street from the enormous parking lot at Holy Communion Church, which has hundreds and hundreds of parking spaces and is leased out in the evening to businesses all over the neighborhood. So the anticipation is that the parking for this restaurant will all be across the street at that parking lot. I think it's very likely that some of those parking spaces I'm showing on site will end up being used for other uses. But that happens all the time. I can't control what the restaurant operator, chooses to put outside his back door. It's an existing building, it's an existing commercial bay. When I say we think it's going to be a restaurant, that's speculation. There's not a restaurant tenant. Right now it's a barber shop, which doesn't involve any back of house stuff. It might end up being another commercial tenant that doesn't need all that stuff in the back. And we're going to be proceeding through TRC and into construction of these houses almost certainly before a commercial tenant comes and decides to lease the building and expresses what stuff he needs. Therefore, it's impossible for me to anticipate, this is going to be a barbecue restaurant and they're going to need, a machine for cooking a hog back there. I don't know what they're going to need. It may be that we leave so little space that the commercial space doesn't work for a big restaurant that requires a huge, messy back of house. Maybe it's going to have to be a coffee shop or a bakery that doesn't have as much stuff back there. But that's going to be up to the market. Once they see what we're building back there, once they see how much land we're leaving for back of house, restaurateurs and other commercial tenants are going to judge for themselves whether their business plan is a good fit for that building. I can't control that. It's not an architectural problem. And TRC can't control that either. TRC is not going to review grease traps and trash cans and all that. They really don't do that. TRC looked at this. They said it's perfectly zoning compliant. We don't really see much for TRC to comment on this. It's existing lot, existing grade, existing, not much is changing from TRC's perspective. They said, take it to the BAR. If the BAR likes the architecture, it can move through TRC quickly. So I'm just expressing all that to say, I don't disagree with your concern, Glenn. I actually kind of agree with you that, it might be nice if a huge restaurant could go in here and have a huge, outdoor dining seating that fills up the whole parking lot. That would be beautiful, but it's not the development plan my client wants. My client's priority is building two houses back there. The commercial space is a secondary priority and it's going to fit the tenant that it's going to fit. And I kind of have to address the project on the terms that it's been presented to me. I don't really know what else I could do for you if you were to defer it for more restudy on that particular question.
Well, I'll wrap up by thanking the applicant for that response. And I do think, I'm only one board member, but to become comfortable with the request, we know that regardless of the use, there have to be garbage cans, recycling containers, HVAC condenser units, and all of that. And we don't see any of that at the moment. And I think as a responsible designer, you have to plan for all of those items from day one. So I don't think the architecture works once you add those items of real life into it.
What about, would it make any sense to contemplate deferral and specify some of those staff comments that Bill had identified, and also a board requirement to clarify the site plan and include those elements that we know are inevitable. Trash, recycling, mechanical. I think that's pretty typical for what we expect to see on the site plan, even a conceptual.
I think that's fair, Julia. And again, I'm really not trying to rain on anybody's parade. I'm just asking for practicality. And I don't dislike the architecture, but I'm asking that the architecture works with the site, because I can't rightfully vote to approve something today if in a week they realize, oh, wait, we can't fit mechanicals and other necessary items on the site. So these buildings we've had approved don't work.
Lindsay, I don't want to interrupt board discussion. I just wanted to bring to the attention that I think the property owner has their hand raised. So if there's a time that they're allowed to speak, then just.
I see the hand raised, and I want to make sure that if I call on someone, if I recognize you, Mr. Mitchell, that it's for the purpose of clarifying something inaccurate.
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
Well, just with the scope of where the utilities can go, and just a quick response from Mr. Glenn, who I appreciate you guys looking at the project. I met at length with the neighborhood as far as what they wanted and didn't want. But by far, the easiest thing would be to just transfer the one building into residential. But I met with the neighborhood to do that and worked with them to do this particular plan. And with Lee Batchelder with several meetings and with preliminary with TRC to set this up. And I'll be happy to go back and rework and put those, citations for, we have a plan for trash service and grease trap and where the bikes will go on one of those existing, like we have an additional parking space that's not needed for, an extra residential unit from the 13 spaces that we had that we can do across the street. But I'll be happy to address anything you guys want to and put the site plan more detail oriented, but with no problem.
Were you fashioning a motion?
Well, I wonder if Bill would mind just like going back over his list of which staff comments. If he could make the motion, that'd be awesome. And just add a board comment about refining the site plan.
So we're overall then you're, Julia, you're saying you're in support of staff's recommendation as well, which is
I
a
think
deferral.
I would be, yes. And I think I would be, yes, I think I could be on board with everything that you said out of their list of comments and adding something to address Glenn's concern.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I got to go back to number one. Now, if I'm making a motion for deferral to restudy, and then I would name the particular comments. Is that what you're thinking is the better course there, Julia?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could just say deferral with a board requirement to clarify the site plan and staff comments, blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
Okay. Yeah, I almost had you do it right there. I didn't quite get you there.
I just don't know the numbers.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'll make a motion for deferral for restudy with staff's comments, further information on the site plan, and also with staff comments. I'm going to need to go back to number one and go my way through here. Somebody can get me back there.
Bill, I was just making some notes, and it appeared that you
you kept track of that?
I try.
Go, Lindsay.
Appeared, well, I want to make sure you may want to go back through.
Yeah.
It appeared you were okay with all of staff comments with the exception of 3, 5, and 12.
Yes, 3. Yes, correct. Not 3. Let me see 5. I'm sorry, guys. Can y'all scroll through to the next sheet of staff comments? Let's see. Yes, 3, 5, and can you go to the next? And one more. 12. Yes.
Yours is Fillmore here, Bill. I had marked yours as you went through them earlier.
Yeah.
I'm not the only one.
I think you were up in the air about 10. You have 3, 5.
Sorry, Phil.
I think, yeah, you included, I think, all but 3, 5, 12. And I had a question mark by 10 because I wasn't sure whether you.
I think that's one I said I was indifferent to. Yeah. No.
Maybe
No.
would you consider maybe eliminating 14 about the Pierce brick wall as well?
Yeah, I like and agree with what Glenn was saying too. So, okay, so the motion for deferral for restudy with staff comments and exclusion of comment 3, 5, is it 12? Correct.
And 12.
3, 5, and 12, and comment 1 about the wall.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion. But you have more, Bill?
What did you say? I think the wall is comment 14, isn't it?
It is.
On mine,
It's shown
it
as
says
1 on the
1.
screen, but
Yeah,
that's fine.
Okay, I was just reading that. Okay, comment 14, correct. Comment 14 regarding the wall, exemption of that comment.
Okay. So we've got a motion on the floor for deferral for restudy of the site plan. We need further information on it with staff comments, all of staff comments with the exception of 3, 5, 12, and 14 regarding the wall, to clarify. Is that
correct? Yes, thank you, Lindsay.
okay? Do I have a second to Bill's motion?
No, I'll second it.
I don't want to do it again.
Do a vote, Glenn,
In favor.
Fillmore,
Yay in favor.
Bill,
Yay in favor.
Julia,
Yay in favor.
chair votes with the majority and the motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Mr. Gould and Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chairman, motion to adjourn.
Yes, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, no opposed. We have come to the end of the meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tori and Allison and Frankie.
Yes.
Yeah.
Are we still? Are we still public or?
Recording stopped, and I don't see anybody else here. Do you guys?
I see Andrew.
Andrew.
Andrew's name.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to
It says
say.
we're live on YouTube.